Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Special Agent Daniel Alvarez stepped out of his car, and the stifling Miami night pressed down on him like a suffocating weight. The warehouse district south of downtown had always unsettled him, despite having served 15 years at the FBI's Miami field office. Tonight, that unease took on a more intense form. Despite the 32-degree heat, he felt an instinctive chill, as if ice-cold water were running down his body. "You feel that?" his partner, Agent Marisol Hernandez, asked quietly, her hand instinctively moving toward her service weapon. She'd only been with the Bureau for 3 years, but she had the instincts of a veteran. Growing up in Overtown had given her a sixth sense for danger that no amount of Quantico training could replicate. Daniel nodded, scanning the shadows between the corrugated metal buildings. They were here, following up on a tip about Alejandro Cruz, a person of interest in a series of disappearances that had plagued South Beach for the past 6 months. Young women, all between 18 and 25, all last seen leaving nightclubs along Ocean Drive. No bodies had been found, which in Daniel's experience meant one of two things. Either they were being trafficked, or someone was very, very good at disposal. The informant had been specific: Warehouse 47B, 3rd row from the water. Cruz would be there tonight, along with merchandise. The word alone made Daniel's jaw clench. After what he'd seen in his career, the casual dehumanization still got to him. They moved silently through the maze of containers and loading docks, their footsteps muffled by years of training. The warehouse district was a labyrinth at night, all sharp angles and blind corners. Security lights created pools of harsh white illumination, making the shadows between them seem even darker. Somewhere in the distance, a foghorn sounded from the port, lonely and mournful. "There," Marisol whispered, pointing to a building ahead. A faint light leaked from beneath a roll-up door, and they could hear voices, muffled, but definitely multiple people inside. Daniel keyed his radio. "All units, we have visual on Warehouse 47B. Hernandez and I are moving in for reconnaissance. Hold positions until my signal." The response crackled back. "Copy that, Alvarez." Backup is standing by. As they approached the building, Daniel noticed something that made his blood run cold. Fresh tire tracks in the oil-stained concrete, multiple sets, all leading to the loading dock. But more disturbing were the drag marks. Parallel lines between the tire tracks, as if something heavy had been pulled from vehicles into the warehouse. Marisol saw them too. Her face hardened, and she drew her weapon. They'd both seen enough to know what those marks likely meant. They found a side door, its lock hastily cut with bolt cutters, recently, judging by the bright metal shavings on the ground. Daniel and Marisol exchanged a look. Someone else had broken in tonight. This complicated things significantly. Inside, the warehouse was a cavern of shadows and rust. Rows of empty shelving units created a skeletal maze, and the air smelled of motor oil, mildew, and something else. Something organic and wrong that made Daniel's stomach turn. They moved deeper into the building, following the sounds of voices that seemed to echo from everywhere and nowhere at once. Then they heard it. A woman's scream, sharp and desperate, cut short abruptly. "FBI!" "Nobody move," Daniel shouted, abandoning stealth as they rushed toward the sound. They rounded a corner into a cleared area lit by work lights. and the scene that greeted them would haunt Daniel's dreams for years to come. Alejandro Cruz stood in the center of the space, but he wasn't alone. 3 other men Daniel didn't recognize were with him, all armed. But it was what was behind them that made his blood freeze. A shipping container, its doors open, revealing at least a dozen young women huddled inside. Some were unconscious. Others stared with the blank, 1,000-yard stare of the deeply traumatized. And there was blood. Too much blood. "Drop your weapons," Marisol commanded, her voice steady despite what they were seeing. Cruz smiled, a cold, reptilian expression that never reached his eyes. "Agents, you're just in time for the party, though I'm afraid you've complicated things." "It's over, Cruz," Daniel said, his weapon trained on the man's center mass. "Backup is 30 seconds out. Make this easy on yourself." Cruz laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Easy?" Agent Alvarez. "Nothing about this has been easy. Do you have any idea what you've stumbled into? This goes so much deeper than you think. People you trust, people in your own building, they're part of this." Daniel's finger tensed on the trigger. He'd heard this before. Criminals trying to sow doubt, create confusion. But something in Cruz's eyes, a genuine fear beneath the bravado, gave him pause. "Names," Daniel demanded. "Give us names, and maybe we can work something out." "Names?" Cruz's smile widened. "How about I give you something better? How about I show you what really happens to the ones who don't make it to market?" Before Daniel could respond, Cruz pressed something in his hand, a remote detonator. The explosion that followed wasn't large, but it was targeted. The shipping container's interior lit up with phosphorus charges, and the screaming that followed was inhuman. "No!" Marisol rushed forward, but Daniel grabbed her, pulling her back as the heat wave hit them. The other men scattered, fleeing into the warehouse's depths. Cruz stood his ground, still smiling as the flames reflected in his eyes. "You want to know the truth, Alvarez?" he called out over the roar of the fire. "Check your own house. Check the Morrison file from 2018. Your supervisor, Jason Morales, ask him about the boats that come in on Tuesdays. Ask him about Gabriela Torres and why she really disappeared from the bureau." Backup crashed through the doors then, flooding the warehouse with agents and tactical officers. Cruz dropped his weapon, raising his hands in surrender, but his eyes never left Daniel's. In the chaos that followed, the arrests, the desperate attempts to save the women from the container, the arrival of fire crews and paramedics, those words echoed in Daniel's mind. They saved 9 of the 14 women in the container. 5 died from smoke inhalation before the fire could be suppressed. Each face would join the gallery of victims that haunted Daniel's sleepless nights. Later, at the field office, as dawn broke over Biscayne Bay, Daniel sat at his desk staring at his computer screen. The Morrison file from 2018, he remembered it vaguely. A human trafficking case that had gone cold, eventually archived as unsolved. Jason Morales had been the lead investigator. He pulled up the file, his coffee growing cold as he read. The details were sparse, almost deliberately so. Witnesses who had disappeared, evidence that had been mishandled, and at the center of it all, a name that made his blood run cold: Gabriela Torres. She hadn't just been an agent who'd left the bureau. She'd been investigating corruption within the Miami field office itself when she'd vanished without a trace. "You're here early." Daniel looked up to find Jason Morales standing in his doorway. His supervisor looked tired, his usually immaculate suit wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. "Couldn't sleep," Daniel said carefully, still processing what we saw. Jason nodded, stepping into the office. "Rough night. I heard Cruz is talking, trying to make a deal." "Yeah," Daniel said, watching Jason's face carefully. He's saying some interesting things. Criminals will say anything to save their skin, Jason said, but there was something in his voice, a tension that hadn't been there before. Don't let him get in your head, Alvarez. You did good work tonight. As Jason left, Daniel noticed something he'd never paid attention to before. A slight tremor in his supervisor's left hand, the kind that comes from chronic stress. Or guilt. Marisol appeared in the doorway moments after Jason left. She closed the door behind her and sat down across from Daniel. I did some digging, she said quietly. Those boats Cruz mentioned? There's a pattern. Every Tuesday, between 2 and 4 a.m., several vessels dock at a private marina in Key Biscayne. They're registered to a shell company that, if you follow the paper trail far enough, has connections to several FBI personnel. Daniel felt the floor drop out from under him. How deep does this go? I don't know, Marisol admitted, but I found something else. Gabriela Torres, she didn't just disappear. Her car was found in the Everglades, burned out. The investigation was closed after just 2 weeks. Guess who signed off on closing it? Daniel didn't need to guess. The signature would be Jason Morales. We need to be careful, Daniel said. If this is what I think it is, we don't know who we can trust. Marisol leaned forward. I know someone. Agent Vanessa Lopez in Internal Affairs. She's been looking into irregularities in the Miami office for months, but she hasn't been able to find solid evidence. What Cruz gave us might be the break she needs. Daniel nodded slowly. They were walking into dangerous territory. In his experience, corruption investigations were like cancer surgery. You never knew how deep you'd have to cut until you started, and sometimes the patient didn't survive the operation. Set up a meeting, he said finally. Somewhere public, somewhere safe. As Marisol left to make arrangements, Daniel turned back to his computer. He pulled up more files, shipping manifests, arrest records, evidence logs. Patterns began to emerge, suspicious gaps in documentation, cases that had been dropped for unclear reasons. All of them seemed to orbit around Jason Morales like planets around a dark sun. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop digging, or you'll join Torres. Daniel's hand moved instinctively to his weapon. He looked around the office, suddenly aware of how many windows there were, how many angles someone could watch him from. The familiar space now felt hostile, full of hidden eyes and potential threats. Another text. You have a daughter. Isabella, right? Beautiful girl. Scholarship to FIU. It would be a shame if something happened to her. Ice flooded Daniel's veins. Isabella was his everything, the bright spot in his life after his divorce. The fact that whoever was texting him knew about her scholarship, information that wasn't public, told him this threat was very real. He stood up, pocketing his phone. He needed to get to Isabella, make sure she was safe. But as he reached for his jacket, Jason Morales appeared in his doorway again. Going somewhere, Daniel? His supervisor's tone was different now, harder, with an edge of menace. Just need some air, Daniel said, trying to keep his voice casual. Jason stepped into the office, closing the door behind him. You know, I've always liked you, Daniel. You're a good agent, thorough, dedicated. But sometimes being too thorough can be dangerous. Is that a threat, Jason? It's advice, Jason said, moving closer, from someone who's been around longer than you. This city, this job, it's all about balance. Push too hard in one direction, and things tip over. People get hurt. Good people. People like Isabella. Daniel's hand moved toward his weapon, but Jason held up his hands. Relax, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to offer you a choice. You can forget what Cruz told you, file your report on the warehouse raid, take your commendation for saving those women and go on with your life. Or you can keep digging and find out just how deep this rabbit hole goes. But I promise you, Daniel, you won't like what you find at the bottom. You're admitting to corruption? Jason laughed, a bitter sound. Corruption? Is that what you think this is? Daniel, this city runs on blood, always has. The cocaine cowboys of the 80s, the cartels of the 90s, the human trafficking networks of today, they're all part of the same ecosystem. We just try to keep it from spilling onto the streets where the tourists can see it. You're supposed to be stopping it, not enabling it. Are we? Jason asked. Tell me, Daniel, what happens when you arrest one trafficker? Another takes their place within a week. What happens when you bust one drug shipment? 10 more get through while you're doing the paperwork. We're not winning this war. We're just managing the casualties. Daniel felt sick. So, you joined them? I made a deal, Jason corrected. Certain shipments get through, certain people stay off our radar, and in exchange they give us the really bad ones. The ones who hurt kids, the serial killers, the terrorists. We get to be heroes, they get to do business, and the city keeps functioning. And Gabriela Torres? Did she threaten this balance? Jason's face darkened. Gabriela was an idealist, like you. She thought she could clean up Miami single-handedly. She didn't understand that some fights you can't win. You can only choose how you lose. You killed her. I didn't pull the trigger, Jason said. But I didn't save her either. Just like I won't save you if you keep pushing this. The door burst open. Marisol stood there, weapon drawn, with Agent Vanessa Lopez and a team of internal affairs agents behind her. Step away from Agent Alvarez, Supervisor Morales. Jason's face went pale. He looked at Daniel. You were wearing a wire? Daniel pulled the small recording device from under his shirt. Every word, Jason. As internal affairs agents moved in to arrest him, Jason Morales looked at Daniel with a mixture of respect and pity. You have no idea what you've just done, he said. The people I answer to, they don't forgive, and they don't forget. You've signed your own death warrant, Alvarez, yours and everyone you care about. As they led Jason away, Vanessa Lopez approached Daniel. She was a tall woman with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. Agent Alvarez, we're going to need a full debrief, everything you know, everyone involved. Daniel nodded, but his mind was on Isabella. He pulled out his phone to call her, but it went straight to voicemail. His heart rate spiked. My daughter, he said to Marisol. I need to... Already on it, Marisol interrupted. I sent units to her dorm the moment you got those texts. She's safe, Daniel. We're moving her to a secure location. Relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. Through the office windows, he could see the Miami skyline, gleaming in the morning sun. Somewhere out there, in the penthouses and boardrooms, on the yachts and in the private clubs, were the people Jason Morales had answered to. And now they knew Daniel's name. 3 weeks after Jason Morales' arrest, Daniel Alvarez found himself standing at the edge of Biscayne Bay at 3 a.m, watching the dark water lap against the seawall. The investigation had expanded far beyond what anyone had anticipated. 17 FBI employees had been suspended, 5 were under arrest, and 2, disturbingly, had simply vanished without a trace. Beside him, Agent Vanessa Lopez checked her watch for the 3rd time in as many minutes. He's late, she muttered, her hand resting on her service weapon. He'll show, Daniel replied, though he wasn't entirely confident. Their informant, a harbor master named Lorenzo Delgado, who claimed to have documentation of the Tuesday night boat arrivals, had been increasingly paranoid in their communications. His last text had simply read, "They know. Pier 47. 3 a.m. Come alone." Neither of them had come alone, of course. Marisol Hernandez was positioned on a nearby rooftop with a sniper rifle, and a tactical team waited in unmarked vans 3 blocks away. After what had happened to Gabriela Torres, they weren't taking any chances. A figure emerged from the shadows between 2 shipping containers. Lorenzo Delgado looked like he hadn't slept in days. His harbor master uniform was wrinkled and stained, his eyes darting frantically between Daniel and Vanessa. "You brought backup," he accused, somehow sensing what Daniel had hoped to keep hidden. "Can you blame us?" Vanessa asked. 2 federal agents have disappeared in the last week." Lorenzo laughed bitterly. 2 that you know about. The Bay doesn't give up all its secrets, Agent Lopez. He pulled a waterproof bag from inside his jacket, hands trembling as he handed it over. Manifests, shipping logs, security footage on flash drives, every Tuesday for the past 3 years. But that's not the worst of it. "What could be worse than human trafficking?" Daniel asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "You ever wonder what happens to the ones who don't survive the journey?" Lorenzo asked. "The ones who die in those containers, or the ones who know too much, or the ones who try to escape?" Daniel's stomach turned. "Mass graves?" "No," Lorenzo shook his head. "That would be merciful. They feed them to something in the Bay, something that shouldn't exist." Vanessa and Daniel exchanged glances. "Lorenzo, you're exhausted. Maybe you should—" "I'm not crazy," Lorenzo snapped. "I've seen it. We all have, every harbor worker, every dock hand. We just don't talk about it. But it's there, in the deep channel near Stiltsville. They call it El Hambriento, the hungry one." Daniel was about to respond when his earpiece crackled to life. Marisol's voice, tense and urgent. "Multiple vehicles approaching your position. 3 black SUVs, no plates, get out of there now." But it was too late. The SUVs screeched to a halt, surrounding them. Men in tactical gear poured out, but something was wrong. They weren't moving like law enforcement or even military. They moved with an unsettling synchronization, like puppets on the same strings. "FBI! Stand down!" Vanessa shouted, but the men kept advancing. Lorenzo grabbed Daniel's arm. "They're not human anymore," he whispered. "They've been in the water. They've been touched by it." The first shot came from Marisol's position, a warning shot that sparked off the concrete near the lead figure's feet. He didn't even flinch. None of them did. "Run!" Daniel grabbed Lorenzo and shoved him toward the water as gunfire erupted. Vanessa was already moving, returning fire as she retreated. The tactical team's van roared to life, racing toward their position, but the synchronized men moved to intercept it with inhuman coordination. Daniel, Vanessa, and Lorenzo dove behind a stack of shipping containers as bullets sparked off the metal around them. In the chaos, Daniel noticed something that made his skin crawl. The attackers weren't trying to kill them. They were herding them toward the water. "This way." Lorenzo led them through a maze of containers and equipment toward an old maintenance shed. They burst through the door to find a hidden speedboat moored at a private dock. "You planned this?" Vanessa asked as they climbed aboard. "I've been planning this for months," Lorenzo admitted, starting the engine. "Ever since I saw what they do to people who ask too many questions." The boat roared to life, and they sped out into the bay. Behind them, Daniel could see the synchronized men standing at the water's edge, watching them go but not pursuing. It was as if they'd accomplished their goal just by driving them onto the water. "Where are we going?" Daniel shouted over the engine noise. "The only safe place I know," Lorenzo replied. Stiltsville, the old house is on stilts, but we have to be careful. We're in its territory now. As they sped across the dark water, Daniel tried to process what was happening. The investigation had taken a turn into something beyond corruption, beyond human trafficking. There was something else at play here, something that defied rational explanation. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, but he recognized the syntax immediately. It was from Isabella's protective detail. Your daughter is safe, but they're offering a trade. Her for the evidence. You have 24 hours. Daniel showed the message to Vanessa, who pulled out her own phone. I'm calling in federal marshals from outside Florida. We can't trust anyone from the Miami office anymore. As Lorenzo navigated through the dark waters, he began to talk, his voice barely audible over the engine. It started 5 years ago. Bodies would disappear from the morgue. Overdose victims, drownings, people no one would miss. Then the Tuesday boats started coming. At first, it was just drugs, weapons, then people, and then other things. What kind of other things? Daniel asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Artifacts, Lorenzo said. Old things pulled up from the Caribbean. Stone tablets, gold idols, things with writing that hurt to look at. They were taking them somewhere in the Everglades. I followed a shipment once just to see. There's a facility out there, hidden in the swamps. They're doing something with the water, Agent Alvarez, changing it, changing people with it. Vanessa's phone rang. She answered, listened for a moment, then her face went pale. The tactical team. They're all dead, not shot, drowned. In the middle of the street, 3 blocks from the water. Their lungs were full of seawater. The boat's engine suddenly sputtered and died. In the sudden silence, they could hear nothing but the lapping of waves against the hull. They were dead in the water, miles from shore, in the middle of Biscayne Bay. No, 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 Lorenzo frantically tried to restart the engine. We can't stop here. This is the deep channel. This is where it lives. The water around them began to phosphoresce, glowing with an unnatural blue-green light. Daniel had seen bioluminescence before, but this was different. The light was too bright, too organized, forming patterns that seemed almost like writing. Look, Vanessa pointed to the water. Something was moving beneath the surface, something massive. It wasn't a whale or a shark. Daniel had seen both. This moved wrong, with too many parts moving in different directions. Lorenzo pulled out a flare gun. Whatever happens, don't let it take you alive. The water, it changes you, makes you part of it, part of them. The thing beneath them rose slightly, and Daniel caught a glimpse of what might have been an eye. If eyes could be the size of dinner plates, and filled with an intelligence that was ancient and utterly alien. Then it sank back down, and the boat rocked violently. It's testing us, Lorenzo whispered, seeing if we're offerings or threats. Daniel's phone buzzed again. This time it was a video message. He played it, and his blood ran cold. It showed Isabella in what looked like a warehouse, surrounded by the same synchronized men they'd encountered at the dock. But she wasn't bound or gagged. She was sitting calmly, too calmly. And when she looked at the camera, her eyes had the same phosphorescent quality as the water around them. "Hello, Dad," Isabella said in the video, but her voice was different, layered, as if multiple people were speaking through her. "We have so much to show you. So much you need to understand. The old agreements are breaking down. New arrangements must be made. Come to the port of Miami, Warehouse 19. Come alone or come with your friends. It doesn't matter. We're all going to be family soon." The video ended. Daniel's hands were shaking. "They have my daughter." "Daniel," Vanessa said carefully, "that might not be your daughter anymore." Before he could respond, the engine roared, back to life on its own. Lorenzo hadn't touched it. The boat began moving, but none of them were steering. It was taking them somewhere. "It wants us to see," Lorenzo said, his voice resigned. "It wants us to understand before we choose." They were heading toward Stiltsville, the collection of houses on stilts that had survived hurricanes and time. But as they got closer, Daniel could see lights in houses that should have been abandoned for decades. Figures moved on the platforms between buildings. Human in shape but wrong in their movements. Too fluid, too synchronized. The boat pulled up to a dock as if guided by invisible hands. Standing on the platform was someone Daniel recognized but had hoped never to see again, Gabriela Torres, the FBI agent who had supposedly died investigating the corruption. But, like Isabella in the video, she was changed. Her skin had a subtle scaled quality, catching the moonlight in unusual ways. Her eyes were too bright, and when she smiled, there were too many teeth. "Hello, Daniel," she said, her voice carrying that same multi-layered quality. "I've been waiting for you. We have so much to discuss about the future of Miami, about the old agreements and the new world that's coming." "Gabriela," Vanessa breathed, "you're alive." "I'm so much more than alive," Gabriela replied. "I'm evolved." "We all are. The corruption you've been investigating? It's just the surface. Humans trying to profit from something they don't understand. But the real power, the real truth, has always been in the water." She gestured to the house behind her. "Come inside. Let me show you what Agent Morales never understood. Let me show you why some fights aren't meant to be won. They're meant to transform us." Daniel looked at Vanessa and Lorenzo. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and miles from help. But his daughter was out there somewhere, changed or threatened, and he needed answers. "If we go in there," Lorenzo said quietly, "we might not come out as ourselves." "Maybe that's the point," Daniel replied, stepping onto the dock. "Maybe that's always been the point." As they followed Gabriela into the stilt house, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something ancient. Something that had been waiting in the waters off Miami long before the city was ever built. The corruption, the trafficking, the violence, it was all just bait, drawing in those who would either serve or be transformed. Inside the house, the walls were covered with maps of Miami's underground waterways, photographs of artifacts that hurt to look at, and tanks filled with water that glowed with that same phosphorescent light. In the center of the room was a table with files spread across it, FBI files, including ones that were supposed to be classified beyond even Daniel's clearance level. "The Antiquities Division has known for 53 years, Gabriela said, running her transformed fingers across the documents. "Ever since the Bay of Pigs, when Cuban refugees reported seeing things in the water, things that helped them or hunted them, depending on something we still don't understand." She pulled out a photograph, grainy, black and white, showing what looked like a massive temple structure underwater. "This is what's really in the deep channel. Not a creature, a city. Older than human civilization, waiting. The trafficking, the drugs, the violence, it all feeds it somehow. Human suffering in proximity to water creates resonance." "You're insane," Vanessa said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Gabriela asked. "How did those agents drown on dry land, Vanessa? How is Isabella speaking with voices not her own? How are we controlling boats with our thoughts?" She moved to one of the glowing tanks. "The water changes things. It's been seeping into Miami's water table for decades. Small amounts, not enough to transform, but enough to influence. Make people more susceptible to suggestion, more likely to look the other way. Why do you think Miami has always been so corrupt? It's not the drugs or the money. It's the water. What do you want? Daniel demanded. What does it want? Acknowledgement, Gabriella replied. Partnership. The old things in the bay have been here longer than humanity. They've watched us build on their territory, pollute their waters, traffic humans like cattle above their sacred spaces. The Tuesday boats, they were tribute. The corruption was a tithe. But Jason Morales got greedy, stopped following the rules. So new arrangements need to be made. She turned to Daniel. Your daughter is safe, for now. But she's been chosen, like I was. Like you're being chosen now. We can fight this and lose everything. Or we can adapt and save what we can of Miami. You want us to join you, Daniel said. It wasn't a question. I want you to understand that you already have, Gabriella replied. The moment you stepped onto that boat, the moment you entered these waters seeking truth, you became part of this. The only question is whether you'll accept it or fight it. Lorenzo, who had been silent, suddenly spoke. There's a third option. There always has been. Everyone turned to look at him. He pulled something from his pocket, a small device with a single button. Dead man's switch, he said. I've been documenting everything for 3 years. Every shipment, every disappearance, every transformation. It's all uploaded to servers around the world, set to release in, he checked his watch, 18 hours unless I input the code. The world will know about Miami, about the water, about all of it. Gabriella's expression didn't change, but the water in the tanks began to bubble violently. You don't know what you're doing. If the outside world knows, they'll try to destroy it, and it will defend itself. The entire city could be swallowed by the bay. Maybe that's what needs to happen, Lorenzo said. Maybe Miami was never meant to exist here. The house began to shake. Outside, the water was rising, impossible waves forming in the otherwise calm bay. Daniel could hear something vast moving beneath them. The structural supports of the house groaning under pressure they were never meant to withstand. Choose now, Daniel, Gabriella said urgently. Save your daughter and your city by joining us, or watch it all be destroyed by Lorenzo's revelation. Daniel looked at Vanessa, who was pale but determined. They'd come seeking answers to corruption, and instead had found something that challenged everything they believed about reality. His daughter was out there, transformed or held captive. The city he'd sworn to protect harbored an ancient secret that could destroy it. The standoff in the stilt house lasted only seconds, but to Daniel, it felt like hours. The water beneath them churned with increasing violence, and through the windows, he could see phosphorescent shapes moving, things that might have been human once or might never have been human at all. 10 seconds to decide, Lorenzo said, his finger hovering over the dead man's switch. Or I make the choice for all of us. Daniel's mind raced. His training told him to secure the situation, arrest everyone, and sort it out later. But nothing in his training had prepared him for this. He thought of Isabella, of her strange voice in that video, of all the missing people who might still be alive but transformed. Wait, Daniel said. Gabriella, prove to me that Isabella is safe. Show me my daughter, the real her, not whatever that was in the video. Gabriella tilted her head, that unsettling, multi-layered quality entering her voice again. She's at Warehouse 19, as we told you. But Daniel, you need to understand. She's already been touched by the water. Not fully transformed, not yet, but enhanced. She volunteered, Daniel, after we explained everything to her. You're lying. Am I? Gabriella pulled out a tablet, its screen glowing with the same phosphorescence as the water. She swiped across it, and a live feed appeared. Isabella, sitting in what looked like a medical facility, hooked up to IV drips that glowed with that familiar blue-green light. But she looked normal mostly. Her eyes were brighter, yes, but she was writing in a notebook, looking focused and determined rather than terrified. "She's documenting the process," Gabriella explained. "Your daughter is brilliant, Daniel. She understood immediately what this means for humanity. Evolution, not extinction. Partnership, not domination." "This is insane," Vanessa breathed, but Daniel noticed she hadn't drawn her weapon. The house shook again, more violently this time. Through the floorboards, water began to seep. Not normal seawater, but the glowing kind that seemed to move with purpose. "The city's founders knew," Gabriella continued, seemingly unconcerned by the rising water. "Julia Tuttle, Henry Flagler, they all knew something was here. They made the first agreements. Promised the bay its tributes and it would let the city flourish. Every major hurricane that should have destroyed Miami but didn't, that wasn't luck, Daniel. That was the agreement being honored." Lorenzo laughed bitterly. "And the hurricanes that did hit? What about Andrew?" "Punishment," Gabriella replied simply. The tributes had stopped. The agreement was broken. Andrew was a warning. And now, with Jason Morales' network collapsed, the agreement is broken again. The water was ankle-deep now, and Daniel could feel it. Not just cold and wet, but almost electric, sending tingles up his legs that weren't entirely unpleasant. Part of him wanted to sink into it, to let it take him, to understand what Gabriella understood. "Fight it, Daniel," Vanessa said sharply, grabbing his arm. "That's not you thinking. It's the water." "Is there a difference anymore?" Gabriella asked. "Every glass of water you've drunk in Miami for the past 5 years has had trace amounts. Every shower, every swim in the ocean. You're already part of this, all of you. The only question is whether you'll accept it consciously or have it forced upon you." Daniel's phone rang. An unknown number. He answered, putting it on speaker. "Dad?" It was Isabella's voice, clearer now, more like herself. "Dad, I'm okay. I know this is scary, but you need to listen to Agent Torres. What's happening here? It's bigger than just Miami. It's happening in coastal cities all over the world. The old things are waking up, and we can either work with them or..." The line went dead. The lights in the stilt house flickered and failed, leaving them in darkness lit only by the phosphorescent water that was now knee-deep. "Lorenzo," Daniel said in the darkness, "give us more time. 24 hours. Let me see my daughter. Let me understand what's really happening before you destroy everything. You think I'm the one with power here?" Lorenzo laughed, but there was fear in it. "The moment I entered this house, I lost. Look at your hands, Agent Alvarez." Daniel looked down. His hands were glowing faintly, the same blue-green as the water. So were Vanessa's and Lorenzo's. They were all infected, or blessed, or cursed. He didn't know which word applied anymore. "The transformation has already begun," Gabriella said softly. "Fighting it will only make it painful. Accept it, and you'll understand everything." Something massive moved beneath the house, and the entire structure lifted several feet before settling again. In the momentary elevation, Daniel glimpsed the bay around them. It was full of lights beneath the water, an entire city's worth, geometries that hurt to perceive with human eyes. "Jesus Christ," Vanessa whispered. "How long has that been there?" "Always," Gabriella replied. "Miami was built on top of it. Every skyscraper's foundation goes deep enough to touch the outer structures. Every time someone drills for water, they risk breaking into the inner chambers. We've been living inside something else's home, and now it wants to meet us properly. Daniel made a decision. We go to Warehouse 19, all of us. I need to see Isabella to understand what she knows. Then we decide. The boat won't start again unless they want it to, Lorenzo said. Then we swim, Daniel replied, surprised by his own words. The thought of entering that glowing water should have terrified him, but instead it felt like coming home. No, Vanessa said firmly. We take the emergency raft. We paddle if we have to. We maintain some control. They found an inflatable emergency raft in the house's storage area, suspicious in itself, as if someone had prepared for this exact scenario. As they paddled through the phosphorescent waters toward the port, Daniel saw things that would have broken his mind just days ago. Figures moving beneath the surface with too many limbs, architectural structures that defied physics, and occasionally faces he recognized. Missing persons from FBI files, but transformed, adapted, evolved. The port of Miami at 4 a.m. should have been relatively quiet, but Warehouse 19 was bustling with activity. As they approached, Daniel recognized several people. FBI agents who had supposedly gone missing. Dock workers who had been presumed dead, even a federal judge who had vanished during a fishing trip 6 months ago. They all moved with that same fluid synchronization, loading and unloading crates that contained things Daniel couldn't quite focus on. Objects that seemed to shift and change when he wasn't looking directly at them. Isabella was waiting for them at the warehouse entrance. She looked like herself, mostly, but her movements were more graceful, her eyes more knowing. When she hugged Daniel, he could feel the change in her. She was stronger, her skin cooler, and there was something else, a sense of connection to everything around them. "Dad, I'm sorry for the video," she said. "They needed to get your attention to make you understand this was real. But I'm still me. I'm just more now." "Isabella, what did they do to you?" "They showed me the truth," she replied. "Come inside, let me show you what Agent Morales never understood, what the corruption was really hiding." Inside Warehouse 19 was a vast operation. Scientists, some human, some clearly transformed, worked alongside beings that Daniel couldn't quite classify. The warehouse extended down, deeper than should have been possible, with glass walls showing they were now below sea level, surrounded by water but not flooded. "This is Dr. Elena Vasquez." Isabella introduced a woman whose transformation was more advanced, gills visible on her neck, eyes completely adapted for underwater vision. She was with the CDC before she joined us. Dr. Vasquez spoke, her voice carrying the familiar, multi-toned quality. "Agent Alvarez, what do you know about climate change?" The question was so unexpected that Daniel almost laughed.
"What does that have to do with anything?" "Everything," Dr. Vasquez replied. "The seas are rising. Within 50 years, Miami will be underwater. The old things in the bay know this. They're offering us a choice. Adapt now, willingly, and survive. Or resist and drown when the waters come." She led them to a massive tank that took up an entire wall. Inside was a perfect scale model of Miami, but as it would look underwater. The buildings were intact but modified, connected by tubes and passages, air pockets maintained by bioluminescent organisms. "This is the future," Dr. Vasquez said. "Not just for Miami, but for every coastal city. The transformation isn't a curse. It's evolution, guided and accelerated. We can breathe water and air, survive pressure changes that would kill normal humans, and most importantly, we can communicate with them." "Them?" Daniel asked, though he suspected he knew. "The original inhabitants," Gabriella answered. "They're not aliens or monsters. They're Earth's first intelligent species, driven into the deep waters when the climate changed before. Now it's changing again, and they're offering to share their knowledge, their technology, their biology. In exchange for what? Vanessa demanded. Partnership. An end to the pollution, the violence, the trafficking, the corruption Agent Morales was part of. It was humans trying to profit from something sacred to them. The Tuesday boats were supposed to bring offerings, art, music, cultural exchanges. Instead, Morales turned it into human trafficking, drug running, everything they despise. Isabella took Daniel's hand. Dad, I've been in the water. I've seen their cities, their libraries. Yes, they have libraries. Information stored in ways we can barely comprehend. They've been watching us for centuries, waiting for us to be ready. Climate change is forcing their hand. We either evolve together or perish separately. This is a choice for humanity, not just us, Lorenzo said, his finger still on the dead man's switch. The world deserves to know. If the world knows, there will be panic, Dr. Vasquez countered. Military strikes, nuclear weapons perhaps. They'll try to destroy what they don't understand, and the old ones will defend themselves. The tsunamis alone would kill millions. Daniel looked around the warehouse, at the transformed humans working alongside things that shouldn't exist. At his daughter, who was still herself, but something more. At the model of an underwater Miami that might be inevitable. How many people know about this? He asked. Thousands, Gabriella replied. In governments, corporations, scientific institutions around the world. It's been managed, controlled, hidden for decades. But the secret is failing. Too many transformations, too many sightings. Lorenzo's right that the world will know soon. The question is how they learn, through careful revelation and preparation, or through catastrophic exposure. An alarm suddenly blared through the warehouse. One of the transformed agents rushed over. We have a problem. Military helicopters, incoming from Homestead Air Force Base. Someone talked. Daniel looked at Vanessa, who was pale. I had to, she said quietly. I sent a backup message to Washington before we left the dock. If I didn't check in, they were supposed to send retrieval. You've doomed us all, Gabriella said. But there was more sadness than anger in her voice. The warehouse began to shake. Through the transparent walls, Daniel could see something rising from the bay floor, structures, ancient and impossible, breaking through sediment accumulated over millennia. The old city was surfacing. They're protecting us, Isabella said, awe in her voice. The old ones. They're revealing themselves to protect us. Outside, they could hear the helicopters approaching, along with sirens, lots of sirens. Every law enforcement agency in South Florida was converging on their position. Lorenzo lowered his hand from the dead man's switch. It doesn't matter anymore. The secret's out now. Through the warehouse's massive doors, Daniel could see the bay. The water was glowing so brightly it looked like dawn, and things were emerging, not monsters, but beings of impossible beauty and terror, things that had inspired humanity's myths of sea gods and demons. They rose from the water with grace and purpose, forming a barrier between the warehouse and the approaching military forces. Dad, Isabella said urgently, you have to choose now. Stay human and be arrested, or worse, when they get here. Or complete the transformation and help us prevent a war. Daniel looked at his daughter, at Vanessa, who was staring at the emerging beings with a mixture of fear and wonder, at Lorenzo, who had dropped his dead man's switch and was walking toward the water as if in a trance. How do we know they're telling the truth? Daniel asked. How do we know this isn't an invasion? Isabella smiled sadly. You don't? But Dad, they've been here longer than humans have existed. If they wanted to invade, they would have done it millennia ago. They're trying to save us, even though we've polluted their waters, destroyed their reefs, and hunted their companions to near extinction. That's not invasion. That's mercy. The first helicopter appeared overhead, searchlights blazing. A loudspeaker crackled to life. "This is the United States military. All personnel exit the building with your hands visible." "They won't negotiate," Gabriella said. "They can't." The existence of the old ones challenges everything: religion, science, human supremacy. They'll try to destroy evidence, contain witnesses. Dr. Vasquez was already moving, directing the transformed humans to secure sensitive materials. "We have protocols for this. Underground passages to the bay. But we need to go now." "I'm not running," Daniel said. "I'm a federal agent. I can talk to them, explain—" "With gills on your neck and glowing eyes?" Gabriella interrupted. "Look at yourself, Daniel." He looked down at his hands. The phosphorescence had spread, his skin taking on a scaled pattern that was strangely beautiful. He rushed to a window, seeing his reflection. His eyes were changing, the irises expanding, taking on the blue-green glow. "The transformation accelerates under stress," Dr. Vasquez explained. "Your body knows it needs to adapt to survive." The military had set up a perimeter. Through the warehouse windows, Daniel could see soldiers in hazmat suits, weapons drawn. They were treating this like a biological contamination event. 15 seconds to comply," the loudspeaker announced. Isabella grabbed Daniel's hand. "Dad, please. Trust me." Daniel thought of everything he'd built his life on: law, order, justice, protecting the innocent. But what if the law was wrong? What if order meant suppressing truth? What if justice required evolution rather than resistance? He thought of Gabriela Torres, who'd tried to expose corruption and ended up discovering something far greater. Of Jason Morales, who'd tried to profit from forces beyond his understanding. Of Lorenzo, who documented everything but now stood at the water's edge, ready to embrace what he'd feared. "Together," Daniel said to Isabella. "We do this together." She smiled, and for a moment, she looked exactly like her mother had, years ago, before the divorce, before the job consumed everything. Together. The warehouse doors exploded inward. Soldiers rushed in, but they stopped short at what they saw. The transformed humans stood their ground, not aggressive but not yielding. And behind them, visible through the transparent walls, the old ones waited in the water, patient and terrible and magnificent. "Stand down," Daniel called out, stepping forward with his FBI badge raised. His voice carried that multi-toned quality now, authority mixed with something older. "I'm Special Agent Daniel Alvarez, FBI. This situation is contained. We need to brief your commanders." The soldiers opened fire. The gunfire lasted only seconds, but time seemed to dilate in Daniel's perception. Another gift or curse of the transformation. He could see the individual bullets cutting through the air, trace their trajectories, and his body moved with impossible speed to shield Isabella. But the bullets never reached them. The water that had been seeping into the warehouse suddenly erupted upward, forming a wall of liquid that caught the bullets mid-flight. The rounds hung suspended for a moment, clearly visible in the phosphorescent barrier, before dropping harmlessly to the floor. "Hold fire! Hold fire!" A voice of authority cut through the chaos. A man in a general's uniform pushed through the soldiers, his face a mask of controlled fury. "What the hell are you shooting at?" "These are federal agents." "Sir, they're not human anymore," one of the soldiers stammered. The general, his nameplate read Harrison, looked at Daniel, at Isabella, at the transformed humans throughout the warehouse. His expression was unreadable. "I know exactly what they are, son," General Harrison said quietly. Then, louder, "All units, fall back to perimeter positions." "No one fires without my explicit order." As the soldiers reluctantly withdrew, Harrison approached Daniel. Up close, Daniel could see that the general's eyes held the faintest trace of phosphorescence. You're one of them, Daniel said. It wasn't a question. One of you, Agent Alvarez, Harrison corrected. I've been managing the military's response to the situation for 15 years, keeping the peace, preventing the war that would destroy both species. Then why the show of force? Harrison sighed. Because I don't control everyone. There are factions in the government, the military, the intelligence community. Some want disclosure, some want war, some want to study them, and some, like me, have been trying to manage a gradual integration that doesn't end in catastrophe. Vanessa stepped forward, her transformation more advanced now, her skin taking on an iridescent quality. The integration is failing. The secret's out. Harrison nodded grimly. I know. That's why I'm here. We have maybe 6 hours before this goes global. Satellite footage of the structures rising from the bay is already circulating. The president is being briefed. Congress is in emergency session. And there are nuclear submarines positioned off the coast, waiting for orders. Nuclear weapons? Isabella's voice was horrified. Against beings that have survived in the deep ocean for millennia? That's insane. It's fear, Harrison replied. The same fear that's driven every war in human history. Fear of the other, the unknown, the uncontrollable. Dr. Vasquez approached, datapad in hand. General, we've been monitoring communications. Several other sites have been activated. Monterey Bay, the Mariana Trench, the Bermuda Triangle, the North Sea. The old ones are emerging globally. This isn't just about Miami anymore. Harrison's face paled. How many sites? 47 that we know of. Every major coastal city has some level of presence. Through the transparent walls of the warehouse, Daniel could see the sun beginning to rise. But it wasn't just illuminating the bay. The water itself was glowing brighter, and more structures were becoming visible. What had looked like empty ocean was revealing itself to be a vast underwater metropolis, architecture that predated human civilization by eons. We need to evacuate the city, Daniel said. If there's going to be conflict, there won't be conflict if we handle this right, a new voice interrupted. Everyone turned. Standing in the warehouse entrance was a figure that made Daniel's transformed senses real. It was humanoid in basic shape, but clearly one of the old ones, 7 feet tall, skin that seemed to shift between scales and something more ethereal, eyes that held depths of intelligence and age that were almost painful to perceive. I am what you would call an ambassador, the being said, its voice resonating at frequencies that bypassed the ears and spoke directly to the mind. We have many names in many languages, but you may call me Tethys. Even General Harrison seemed awed. You're really one of them? The original inhabitants? We never left, Tethys replied. We merely withdrew, waited, watched, and now the time of hiding is over. Why now? Daniel asked, finding his voice. Why reveal yourselves now? Tethys moved closer, and Daniel felt no fear, only a strange sense of recognition, as if some deep part of his DNA remembered when humanity's ancestors first encountered these beings on primordial shores. Your species stands at a crossroads, Tethys explained. Your climate is changing, your oceans rising. Within a century, perhaps less, most of your coastal cities will be submerged. You can face this catastrophe with your current biology and technology, and most of you will perish. Or you can accept our gift: evolution, adaptation, survival. But at what cost? Vanessa demanded. Our humanity? What is humanity? Tethys asked. Is it your DNA? Your appearance? Your culture? Or is it your consciousness, your capacity for growth, your ability to adapt? The transformation doesn't destroy who you are. It expands it. Isabella stepped forward. I've experienced it. I'm still me. I still love my father, still remember my childhood, still dream of becoming a marine biologist. But now I can actually explore the oceans, understand them in ways I never could before. It's not just biological, Dr. Vasquez added. It's consciousness expansion. We can perceive dimensions of reality that were always there but beyond human senses. We can communicate through water itself, share thoughts and feelings directly. It's not losing humanity, it's gaining something more. Lorenzo, who had been silent, finally spoke. I've spent 3 years documenting the horror, the disappearances, the corruption. But now I understand it was all wrong. The horror wasn't them, it was us. What we did to those who discovered the truth. How we tried to exploit something sacred. General Harrison's radio crackled. Sir, Washington is demanding an update. The president wants to know if we're dealing with an invasion. Harrison looked at Tethys. Are we? We are offering partnership, Tethys replied. But understand, with or without humanity, we will survive. We have endured ice ages, meteor impacts, the rise and fall of a dozen intelligent species before you. The question is whether humanity will endure with us or become another fossil layer in Earth's history. That sounds like a threat, Harrison said carefully. It's a statement of fact, Tethys replied. The waters are rising. Your governments know this. Your scientists know this. You've had decades to prepare, and instead, you've accelerated the process. We're offering you a solution, but we won't force it upon you. Daniel felt a shift in the water around his feet. It was receding, pulling back toward the bay. Through the walls, he could see the old ones retreating, the ancient structures beginning to submerge again. Wait, Daniel called out. You're leaving. We're giving you time, Tethys said. 24 hours. Humanity must choose. Accept evolution and partnership, or face the rising waters alone. The transformed among you will serve as bridges between our peoples. They understand both worlds now. And if humanity chooses to fight? General Harrison asked. Tethys's expression, if it could be called that, seemed almost sad. Then you will fight the ocean itself. And no species has ever won that war. The being turned to leave, but paused at the entrance. Agent Alvarez, your daughter has chosen wisely. She will be among the first of the new humanity, whether your species as a whole accepts it or not. Protect her. She is precious to both our peoples now. Then Tethys was gone, walking into the bay and disappearing beneath the waves as if the water itself had swallowed him. The warehouse fell silent except for the distant sound of helicopters and sirens. Miami was waking up to a changed world, and Daniel could already see news vans arriving at the perimeter, cameras trying to capture images of the impossible. We need to control the narrative, General Harrison said, pulling out his phone. If this goes public as an invasion, there will be panic, violence, maybe nuclear strikes. But if we frame it as evolution, as partnership... The truth, Daniel interrupted. We tell the truth, all of it. The corruption, the cover-ups, the transformation. People deserve to know what's really happening. The truth will cause chaos, Harrison argued. Lies have caused worse, Vanessa countered. How many people disappeared because we kept this secret? How many died? Daniel thought of all the missing persons cases that had haunted him, all the families who never got closure. He thought of Gabriela Torres, who had tried to expose the truth and been transformed for it. He thought of Jason Morales, who had tried to profit from it and was now in federal custody, probably undergoing his own transformation in isolation. We have 24 hours, Daniel said. We use them wisely. General, you handle the military side. Keep them from doing anything catastrophic. Vanessa, we need to coordinate with the FBI, get our people on message. Dr. Vasquez, can you prepare scientific documentation? Something that explains the transformation in terms people can understand? What about the public? Isabella asked. They're going to see the videos, the structures in the bay. They're going to panic. Daniel looked at his daughter, still recognizably Isabella, but changed, evolved, something between human and other. She was the future, whether humanity accepted it or not. We show them the truth gradually, he said. Start with the science, climate change, sea level rise, the need for adaptation. Then introduce the old ones as a discovered civilization, not invaders. And finally, present the transformation as a choice, not a conquest. That's a lot to accomplish in 24 hours, Lorenzo said. Then we'd better get started. The next 24 hours were the longest and most crucial in human history. Daniel and his team worked from the warehouse, which had become an impromptu command center. The transformed humans served as living proof that the change didn't mean losing humanity, while scientists from around the world video conferenced in, sharing data about similar sites globally. The president addressed the nation at noon, carefully crafted words about discovery and opportunity rather than invasion and threat. Social media exploded with theories, fear, and surprisingly excitement from younger generations who saw it as the next step in human evolution. Religious leaders struggled to incorporate the revelation into their theologies. Some called it divine intervention, others demonic deception. But a surprising number saw it as part of God's plan, evolution guided by providence. Corporate leaders, especially those in coastal cities, were quickest to accept the reality. They understood rising seas and saw the transformation as a business opportunity. Underwater real estate, new technologies, expanded resources. The military remained the biggest concern. Several hawkish generals pushed for preemptive strikes, arguing that the old ones were vulnerable while partially surfaced. But General Harrison and others who had been secretly transformed held them in check, buying time for diplomacy. As the deadline approached, Daniel stood with Isabella on the warehouse dock, watching the sun set over Biscayne Bay. The water glowed with increasing intensity, and shapes moved beneath the surface. Thousands, maybe millions of the old ones, waiting for humanity's answer. "Do you think we'll choose wisely?" Isabella asked.
Daniel thought of humanity's history. Wars, genocides, environmental destruction, but also art, love, innovation, the capacity for growth and change. I don't know, he admitted. But I think we'll survive either way. Maybe not as we are now, but as something new, something better. Vanessa approached, tablet in hand. The UN Security Council is voting. It's close, but it looks like they're going to approve the partnership proposal. Gradual integration, voluntary transformation centers, shared technology exchange. And the holdouts? Daniel asked. Some inland nations are refusing, saying it's a coastal problem. Some military factions are going rogue, planning unauthorized strikes. And there are civilian militias forming, calling it the end times. Daniel nodded. It was about what he'd expected. Humanity never did anything unanimously. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. But when he read it, he recognized Jason Morales' style. You think you've won, but you've just signed humanity's death warrant. When everyone's transformed, we won't be human anymore. We'll be them. Daniel deleted the message. Morales was wrong. The transformation didn't erase humanity. It expanded it. He could feel it in himself, the gradual changes not just to his body but to his perception. He could sense the water cycle, feel the pull of the tides, understand the ocean's moods. But he was still Daniel Alvarez, still a father, still an FBI agent dedicated to justice. General Harrison's voice came over the radio. 5 minutes to deadline. All units stand ready. The warehouse had become crowded with officials, scientists, journalists, and transformed humans. Everyone watched the bay, waiting to see what would happen when the 24 hours expired. At exactly 8 p.m., the water erupted. Not violently, but with purpose. The old ones emerged in numbers that defied counting, their architecture rising from the depths, bioluminescent and impossible. But they didn't attack. They simply stood at the boundary between water and land, waiting. Tethys emerged, walking across the water as if it were solid, approaching the warehouse. Daniel, Isabella, Vanessa, and General Harrison went out to meet him. Humanity has chosen, Tethys stated, not asking. Most of us have, Daniel replied. There are holdouts, those who will resist. But the majority have voted for partnership. Tethys nodded. As expected. No species transforms uniformly. There will be those who embrace change and those who resist it. We will be patient with the resistors, but we will not wait forever. The waters are rising regardless of human choices. What happens now? Isabella asked. Now we begin, Tethys replied. Transformation centers will be established in every coastal city. Those who choose can begin their evolution. Knowledge will be shared, our understanding of the oceans, of biology, of survival. In return, we ask for an end to the poisoning of the waters, the trafficking of humans, the violence that has marked your species. That's a lot to ask of humanity, General Harrison said. It's the minimum for survival, Tethys countered. Your species is on the brink of extinction, whether you acknowledge it or not. This is not conquest, it's rescue. Daniel felt the truth of it in his bones, in his transformed cells. The old ones weren't invaders or conquerors. They were lifeguards, throwing a rope to a drowning species too proud to admit it needed help. There will be those who see this as the end of humanity, Daniel said. Perhaps it is, Tethys acknowledged, but endings are also beginnings. The age of Homo sapiens may be concluding, but the age of Homo aquatus is just beginning. Over the following weeks, the transformation centers opened. They were voluntary at first, but as the benefits became clear, disease resistance, enhanced strength and intelligence, the ability to survive underwater, more people chose to change. Daniel completed his transformation 2 weeks after the first contact. The process was neither painful nor pleasant. It simply was. His body adapted, his consciousness expanded, and when he emerged from the transformation chamber, he could breathe both air and water with equal ease. Isabella had been right. He was still himself, but more. He could communicate with the old ones, understanding their language that was more thought than sound. He could sense the health of the ocean, feel the currents, know when storms were coming days in advance. But perhaps, most importantly, he could serve as a bridge. As one of the first federal agents to transform, he helped establish protocols for transformed law enforcement, dealing with crimes that now spanned both land and sea. The corruption that had plagued Miami for decades crumbled. It was impossible to maintain criminal networks when transformed humans could sense deception, when the water itself carried truth. Some criminals chose transformation to escape justice, only to find that the process revealed their crimes to the collective consciousness of the transformed. Jason Morales was offered transformation or life in prison. He chose prison, clinging to his humanity even as it meant confinement. But even in prison, the changes were beginning. The water supply carried trace amounts of the transformation agent, not enough to change anyone against their will, but enough that everyone was slowly adapting to the new world. 6 months after first contact, Daniel stood on what had been Miami Beach. The city was different now. Buildings extended into the water, connected by tubes and passages that could be floated or swum through. The population was split between the transformed and the traditional. but they coexisted peacefully for the most part. There were still problems. Anti-transformation terrorists, countries that refused all contact with the old ones, scientists who wanted to weaponize the transformation process. But these were human problems, solvable with time and patience. Isabella had become an ambassador, one of the few who could communicate equally well with both species. She spent her days in the deep waters, learning from the old ones, and her evenings on land, teaching humans what she'd learned. "Any regrets?" Vanessa asked, joining Daniel on the beach. She was fully transformed now, her appearance more aquatic than human, but her personality unchanged. "No," Daniel said honestly. "This is what we were meant to become. Maybe not today, maybe not this way, but eventually. Evolution doesn't stop just because we're comfortable." Out in the bay, a massive form breached, one of the deep dwellers, beings so large and ancient that even the old ones spoke of them in whispers. It was beautiful and terrible, a reminder that humanity, even transformed, was still a young species in an old world. "What do you think happens next?" Vanessa asked. Daniel thought of the files he'd been reading. The other species the old ones had mentioned. Some extinct, some sleeping, some waiting in spaces humanity hadn't even discovered yet. "I think this is just the beginning," he said. "The ocean covers 70% of Earth. We've only explored 5% of it. Now we can explore it all, and who knows what we'll find." As the sun set over the transformed city of Miami, Daniel felt a deep sense of purpose. He'd started this investigation looking for corruption and human trafficking. He'd found something so much larger, humanity's next evolutionary step, guided by beings older than recorded history. The corruption had been real, the trafficking horrific, but they'd been symptoms of a larger disease, humanity's disconnection from the planet that birthed it. Now, that connection was being restored, one transformation at a time. His phone buzzed, a new case, bodies found in the Everglades that showed signs of transformation but also violence. Even in this new world, there would be crimes to solve, justice to pursue. But now he had new tools, new perspectives, and new allies in that pursuit. As he and Vanessa headed back to the warehouse that had become their base of operations, Daniel saw Lorenzo teaching a class of new transfers how to navigate underwater Miami. The former harbor master had become one of the most effective guides for the newly transformed. His years of fear transformed into understanding. General Harrison had been promoted, now overseeing the military's integration with the old one's defense systems. Earth's protection was no longer just a human concern. It was a joint venture, combining human innovation with ancient wisdom. Dr. Vasquez had established a research institute studying the transformation process, working to make it safer and more accessible. Her research had shown that the transformation wasn't just physical, it was consciousness evolution, expanding human awareness into dimensions previously unimaginable. And somewhere in federal custody, Jason Morales sat in his cell, watching news reports of the transformed world, clinging to his pure humanity even as that designation became increasingly meaningless. Daniel sometimes wondered if Morales would eventually accept transformation or die trying to resist it. But that was a problem for another day. Tonight, Daniel had a city to protect. A city that now existed both above and below the waves, inhabited by beings both human and other, all trying to navigate a world that had changed forever in the course of a single investigation. The Miami files, as they'd come to be known, were required reading at Quantico now. Every FBI trainee studied the case, learning how a simple corruption investigation had led to humanity's greatest transformation. But for Daniel, it wasn't about the historic significance. It was about Isabella, safe and thriving in this new world. It was about the women they'd saved from the trafficking ring, many of whom had chosen transformation and now worked to prevent others from suffering as they had. It was about justice, evolved and expanded, but still recognizable. As he dove into the glowing waters of Biscayne Bay, breathing water as easily as air, Daniel Alvarez knew that his investigation was far from over. It had simply transformed, like everything else, into something larger and more complex than he'd ever imagined. The corruption in Miami had been real, the horror genuine, but it had been human horror, human corruption. What came next would be something entirely different. A partnership between species, a shared evolution, and a future that no one could fully predict. But whatever came next, Daniel would investigate it, pursue justice, and protect those who needed protection. He was still FBI, still a guardian of law and order. He was just something more now, something better, something evolved. When the package arrived, Special Agent Carmen Rodriguez had been working at the FBI's Miami field office for just 3 days. The package had arrived in a water-damaged manila envelope. There was no sender information on it, and the name was written on it with what looked like dried mud. The officer who handed her the package seemed eager to get rid of it. "Found this in the lobby this morning," he said, wiping his hands on his pants as if the envelope had been contaminated. "No idea how it got there. Security cameras show nothing. Just static from 3:17 to 3:23 a.m. Carmen examined the envelope in her small office, still sparse with unpacked boxes from her transfer from Denver. Inside was a single cassette tape, the old-fashioned kind that had been obsolete for decades, labeled with the same mud-like substance. Everglades Station 7, November 1987. She should have logged it as evidence immediately, should have followed protocol, but something about the tape called to her. Not audibly, but in a way that made her skin prickle with anticipation and dread. Miami had been her requested posting, drawn by something she couldn't quite name. Now, holding this tape, she felt like she was finally approaching the reason. The FBI building had an old evidence room in the basement with antiquated playback equipment for legacy media. Carmen signed out the key and descended 3 floors underground, where the fluorescent lights flickered and the air smelled of mold and old paper. She found a dusty cassette player and inserted the tape. At first, there was only static. Then a voice emerged. Male, frightened, speaking in rapid Spanish with a thick Cuban accent. Carmen, whose grandmother had fled Castro's regime, understood every word. Day 43 at Station 7. The Rangers still won't come. They say it's federal jurisdiction, but the feds say it's state. No one wants to admit what's happening out here. The sounds at night, they're not alligators. Not anymore. The recording cut to static, then resumed with a different voice. Female, American, clinical in tone. Subject appears to be in advanced stages of integration. Cellular structures breaking down and reconstituting in patterns we don't understand. Request immediate extraction and containment protocol 77 Alpha. More static, then screaming. Not human screaming. Something else. Something that made Carmen's teeth ache and her vision blur. She reached to turn it off, but her hand stopped inches from the button. She couldn't move, couldn't look away, as the screaming transformed into words, spoken in unison by what sounded like dozens of voices. Find us. Find what they buried. Building 779. Subsection 12. Before they wake the others. The tape ended with a sharp click. Carmen gasped, realizing she'd been holding her breath. Her watch showed she'd been listening for 43 minutes, but the tape was only 30 minutes per side. She rewound it to listen again, but this time it played only static. Carmen photocopied the label and pocketed the tape, a violation of evidence protocols, but something told her official channels would make it disappear. Building 779 was in the old federal complex in Homestead, abandoned after Hurricane Andrew in 1992. Subsection 12 would be underground, in the storage areas that had supposedly been sealed due to contamination. She needed a partner for this, someone who knew Miami's hidden history. The personnel files indicated Agent Marcus Thompson had been with the Miami office since 1989, longer than anyone else still active. She found him in the break room, a tall, lean man in his 60s with premature white hair and eyes that had seen too much. Agent Thompson? I'm Carmen Rodriguez, just transferred from Denver. I was wondering if you could help me with something. Marcus looked up from his coffee, studied her for a long moment. You're Diana Rodriguez's granddaughter. I can see it in your eyes. She was a good agent. Carmen's blood chilled. My grandmother was a seamstress. She was never FBI. That's what the records say, Marcus replied, his voice carefully neutral. What do you need help with, Agent Rodriguez? She showed him the photocopy of the tape label. His face went pale. Where did you get this? Someone left it for me. You recognize it? Marcus stood abruptly, walked to the door, and locked it. Not here. Too many ears. Meet me tonight, midnight, at the Homestead facility, Building 779. Come alone, come armed, and whatever you do, don't tell anyone else about that tape. That's a contaminated site. We'd need hazmat gear, official clearance. We need flashlights and nerve, Marcus interrupted. The contamination story was a cover. Always has been. Your grandmother knew that. It's why they erased her from the records. Before Carmen could respond, Marcus unlocked the door and left. She spent the rest of the day researching Building 779, finding frustratingly little. It had been a research facility, then storage, then sealed after Andrew. The contamination reports were vague, mentioning only biological hazards and structural instability. She also searched for any mention of her grandmother in FBI databases. Nothing. But in the Miami Herald archives, she found a single photograph from 1987, a group of federal agents at a crime scene in the Everglades. In the background, partially obscured but unmistakable, was her grandmother's face. The caption identified everyone except her. At 11:30 p.m., Carmen drove south toward Homestead, the tape player on her passenger seat playing the cassette over and over. Each time, it was only static, but she could swear there were patterns in the noise, almost like voices just below the threshold of hearing. The Homestead facility was a cluster of abandoned federal buildings, surrounded by chain-link fence topped with razor wire that had long since rusted. Marcus was waiting at a gap in the fence, carrying an old military-style flashlight and a shotgun. You came, he said, sounding almost disappointed. Part of me hoped you wouldn't. You knew my grandmother, Carmen said. It wasn't a question. Diana was the best agent I ever worked with, Marcus replied, leading her through the fence. She discovered something in '87, something about what the government was really doing in the Everglades. They didn't kill her. That would have raised questions. They did something worse. They erased her, made her forget she'd ever been an agent, made everyone else forget too, except me. I don't know why I remember. Building 779 loomed before them, a concrete monstrosity stained with mold and decay. The main doors had been welded shut, but Marcus led her to a loading dock where the metal had been peeled back like aluminum foil. Hurricane damage? Carmen asked. Something wanted out, Marcus replied. Or in, We were never sure which. Inside, their flashlights revealed a reception area frozen in time. Computers from the early 90s, papers scattered as if everyone had left in a hurry, coffee cups still on desks with dried rings of ancient liquid. Marcus led her to a stairwell descending into darkness. Subsection 12 is 5 floors down, he said. Whatever we find, whatever we see, we can't report it through official channels. They're still watching. They're always watching. As they descended, Carmen noticed the walls were covered in what looked like mold, but it grew in patterns too regular to be natural, spirals and fractals that seemed to move in her peripheral vision. The air grew thicker, more humid, carrying a smell like copper and ozone. On the third sublevel, they heard it, a rhythmic thumping, like a massive heart beating somewhere below them. Marcus froze. "That's new," he whispered. "That wasn't here before." "When were you here before?" 1992. Right before they sealed it. We were supposed to retrieve files, destroy evidence, but something happened to the team. Only 3 of us made it out, and the other 2 changed. They continued down, the thumping growing louder. On the 5th sublevel, they found subsection 12. The door was massive, steel reinforced with warnings in multiple languages. But it stood open, the locking mechanism torn apart from the inside. Beyond was a laboratory that belonged in a nightmare. Operating tables with restraints designed for things that weren't quite human. Tanks filled with murky fluid where shadows of impossible shapes floated. And covering every surface, photographs, hundreds of them, all showing the same location in the Everglades from different angles and different times. Carmen recognized the location immediately. It was where her family had a fishing cabin, where her grandmother had taken her as a child, where she'd learned to shoot and track. The place she'd felt drawn back to ever since. Station 7, Marcus said, confirming her suspicion. It was never just a ranger station. It was an observation post, monitoring something they found in 1969. Something that had been sleeping in the swamp for God knows how long. At the far end of the lab was another door, this one blown outward. Beyond it, a tunnel that shouldn't exist. It extended far beyond the building's foundation, carved from the limestone bedrock. The walls were smooth, almost glass-like, and covered in the same spiral patterns as the stairwell. The thumping was coming from the tunnel. "We should leave," Marcus said. But he was already moving forward, drawn by the same compulsion that gripped Carmen. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, impossible in its dimensions. It couldn't fit under the building, under Homestead, under anything. The ceiling was lost in darkness, but the walls were visible, covered in what looked like cocoons or egg sacs, each the size of a person. Some were old, desiccated, empty. Others pulsed with internal light. In the center of the chamber was the source of the thumping, a massive organic structure, part plant, part animal, part something else entirely. It pulsed with bioluminescent light, and with each pulse, the cocoons on the walls shivered. "My God," Marcus breathed. They weren't studying it. They were feeding it. Carmen approached one of the newer cocoons. Through its translucent surface, she could see a figure inside. Human in shape, but wrong in every detail. Too many joints, skin that shifted between scales and flesh, eyes that opened and tracked her movement despite being suspended in fluid. "The disappearances," she said, understanding flooding through her. "All the people who vanish in the Everglades every year, they don't get lost, they get brought here." "Not brought," Marcus corrected, his voice hollow. "Called. It calls them and they come, just like it called you." Carmen turned to face him, but Marcus was no longer entirely Marcus. His skin was rippling, patterns like those on the walls spreading across his face. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice multiplying into harmonics. "I've been fighting it for 30 years, ever since that day in '92. But when you showed up with the tape, when you spoke your grandmother's name, I couldn't fight anymore. It needs you, Carmen. You're the key it's been waiting for." "The key to what?" "Your bloodline. Your grandmother discovered the truth. Some families have a genetic marker, something that makes them compatible with what this thing is trying to create. Diana resisted, so they erased her memories, suppressed the marker. But it's dominant in you. It has been since you were a child, growing stronger every year." Carmen backed toward the tunnel, but the entrance had sealed, the stone flowing like liquid to close the opening. She was trapped. "Don't fight it," Marcus said, his transformation accelerating. "It's not death. It's evolution. Humanity was never meant to stay as it is. We're chrysalids, waiting to become something greater." The massive structure in the center pulsed brighter, and Carmen felt it in her bones. A call, ancient and irresistible. Her skin began to tingle, then burn. Looking down, she saw the pattern starting to form on her hands. "No," she gasped, pulling out the cassette tape. She didn't know why, but holding it seemed to slow the transformation. The magnetic tape had recorded more than just voices. It had captured some kind of frequency, a pattern that disrupted whatever signal the thing was sending. She pressed play on her portable recorder, and even though the tape had been blank before, now it screamed. The same sound from her first listening, but amplified, reversed, turned into a weapon. The cocoons on the walls began to crack and shrivel. Marcus collapsed, his transformation reversing, leaving him human but unconscious. The central structure writhed, its pulsing becoming erratic. Carmen ran to the sealed entrance, pressing the player against the stone. The rock liquefied, and she dove through, running back through the tunnel as it collapsed behind her. She dragged Marcus's unconscious form up 5 flights of stairs, the building shaking around them. They burst out of building 779 just as it imploded, collapsing into a sinkhole that seemed to go down forever. Marcus Thompson woke up in the FBI medical facility 3 days after Building 7. 7-9 collapsed. His transformation had reversed, but the experience had aged him. His hair was completely white now, his hands trembled constantly, and his eyes held a haunted quality that no amount of therapy would ever erase. Carmen had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation, but no one seemed to know what to investigate. The official report stated that Building 779 had collapsed due to structural damage from an underground aquifer breach. No mention of the laboratory, the tunnel, or the thing beneath. The cassette tape had been confiscated, then mysteriously lost in evidence processing. But Carmen had made a copy before turning it in. Old habit from her Denver days, where evidence had a tendency to disappear in certain cases. She kept it in a deposit box at a bank in Coral Gables, along with photos she'd taken with her phone before the building collapsed. The photos showed only darkness and distortion, but she knew what she'd seen. 3 weeks after the incident, she received another package. This time it came through official mail, postmarked from Ochapee, the smallest post office in the United States, located deep in the Everglades. Inside was a park ranger's badge, corroded with age, and a note. She remembered before they made her forget. Station 7 holds the answers. Come alone, or don't come at all. A friend. The badge belonged to Ranger Patricia Moss, who according to records had died in a boat accident in 1987. But Carmen found discrepancies. Moss's body was never recovered, and her last logged location was Station 7, the same ranger station mentioned on the original tape. Carmen requested reinstatement, claiming she needed to complete field reports from before the incident. Her supervisor, Agent Jennifer Carlisle, approved it with unusual speed. "Just be careful out there, Rodriguez," Carlyle said, her tone suggesting she knew more than she was saying. "The Everglades have a way of swallowing people whole." Carmen drove west on Tamiami Trail, then south on a barely maintained road that led deep into the national park. Station 7 wasn't on any current maps, but she'd found it on a surveyor's chart from 1985. It was listed as decommissioned after 1987, but the structure was supposedly still standing. The road deteriorated into a dirt track, then ended entirely at a rusted gate marked Federal Property, No Trespassing. The lock had been cut years ago. Carmen pushed through on foot, following an overgrown path through sawgrass and cypress. The humidity was oppressive, even for October in Florida. Every sound seemed amplified. The buzz of insects, the splash of unseen creatures in the water, the rustle of vegetation that might have been wind or might have been something else. The GPS on her phone showed her location, then flickered and displayed coordinates that were impossible. Numbers that suggested she was somehow miles underground. Station 7 appeared through the trees like a ghost. It was a 2-story concrete structure, brutalist in design, clearly built for function over form. The windows were boarded up, the door secured with a chain that had been recently replaced. Someone was maintaining this place. Carmen cut the chain with bolt cutters and entered. The interior was a time capsule. Desks with paperwork still laid out, coffee-stained reports dated November 1987. A calendar frozen on the month everything went wrong. But underneath the dust, she noticed signs of recent activity. Footprints, fresh scratches on the floor, and in the back office a modern laptop computer still warm from use. The laptop was password protected, but Carmen had brought a USB drive with FBI decryption software. While it worked, she explored the rest of the station. In the basement, she found what she'd been looking for: files, hundreds of them, documenting something called Project Chrysalis. According to the documents, in 1969, an oil exploration team had discovered something deep beneath the Everglades. A massive organic structure, similar to what she'd seen under Building 779, but much larger. The government had classified it beyond top secret and began studying it. They discovered it was dormant, but showed signs of periodic activity correlated with specific genetic markers in the local population. Her grandmother's name appeared throughout the files. Special Agent Diana Rodriguez had been lead investigator from 1985 to 1987, tasked with understanding the connection between the structure and the increasing disappearances in the area. Her final report, dated November 15, 1987, was horrifying in its implications. The entity is not alien but terrestrial, predating human evolution by millions of years. It appears to be a form of collective consciousness that has been waiting for humanity to reach a specific developmental stage. The genetic markers it seeks are not random. They indicate compatibility for synthesis. Subjects with these markers who come into proximity with the entity experience rapid biological changes, leading to a new form of life that is neither fully human nor fully other. Recommendation: immediate containment is impossible. The entity extends throughout the limestone aquifer beneath South Florida. Any attempt at destruction could trigger a mass awakening event. Suggest memory suppression protocol for all involved personnel and long-term monitoring of marked bloodlines. The laptop beeped. Decryption complete. Carmen accessed the files and found they were recent surveillance reports. Her name was everywhere, along with detailed genetic analyses, psychological profiles, and predictions about her behavior. They'd been watching her since birth, waiting for something. The most recent entry was,
From 3 days ago, Subject Rodriguez has made contact with the preserved sample at Building 779. Transformation markers are active but suppressed. Recommend escalation to Phase 3 if subject proceeds to Station 7. Authorization granted for full disclosure protocol if necessary to achieve voluntary compliance. Voluntary compliance with what? Carmen said aloud. With your purpose, a voice answered from behind her. Carmen spun, drawing her weapon. A woman stood in the doorway, middle-aged, wearing a park ranger's uniform, her badge identifying her as Patricia Moss, the same Patricia Moss who had supposedly died in 1987. You're not real, Carmen said, keeping her gun trained on the woman. I'm as real as you are, Moss replied. More real in some ways. I've been waiting here for 36 years, Carmen. Waiting for Diana's granddaughter to finally come home. You knew my grandmother? I was her partner, both in the FBI and in life. The records won't show that. They erased everything about her, including me. But I remember. The entity made sure I would remember. Moss moved into the room, and Carmen noticed her movements were too fluid, too graceful, like she was swimming through the air rather than walking. In 1987, your grandmother and I discovered the truth, Moss continued. The government wasn't studying the entity. They were negotiating with it, trading people with specific genetic markers in exchange for knowledge, technology, evolutionary advantages for those in power. Your grandmother tried to expose it. So they took her memories and gave her a new life as a seamstress, married her off to your grandfather, let her have a normal existence. And you? I volunteered to stay. Someone had to maintain the watch, keep the records, make sure the truth survived. The entity changed me enough to survive, but not enough to lose my humanity. I've been its guardian and its prisoner ever since. What does it want with me? Moss smiled sadly. You're the culmination of generations of selective breeding, Carmen. Your bloodline, refined and concentrated, carries the perfect genetic sequence for complete synthesis. You could become the bridge between humanity and the entity, the translator that allows both species to coexist. Or you could destroy it all, trigger a mass extinction event that would make the dinosaurs' end look merciful. I don't want either of those things. Then you need to understand what you're dealing with. Come, let me show you the real Station 7. Moss led Carmen to what looked like a supply closet but opened into another staircase descending into the earth. The walls were limestone at first, then something older, a black rock that seemed to absorb light. As they descended, Carmen felt the familiar tingle in her skin, the patterns trying to form. Don't fight it, Moss advised. Let it recognize you, but don't let it claim you. Think of it like learning a language. You need to understand it to communicate, but you don't have to become it. The staircase opened into a natural cavern system, partially flooded with water that glowed with bioluminescent algae. But it wasn't algae, Carmen realized. It was the same substance she'd seen in Building 779, diluted and dispersed through the groundwater. This is the nervous system, Moss explained. Every drop of water in the Everglades is connected to it. Everyone who drinks the water, bathes in it, swims in it, they're all touched by its consciousness. Most people, it ignores. But some, like you, it calls. They reached a larger chamber where the water formed a perfect circle, like a natural pool. In its center, something moved. Not physically, but dimensionally, existing in spaces that human eyes couldn't properly process. Your grandmother stood here in 1987, Moss said. She could have joined with it, become something beyond human. Instead, she chose to forget, to protect you from this destiny. But destiny has a way of finding us anyway. Carmen approached the pool's edge. The water responded to her presence, rising in impossible spirals, forming shapes that almost looked like faces. Thousands of them, maybe millions, all the people who had been absorbed over the millennia. "They're not dead," Moss said, reading Carmen's expression. "They're part of something larger. Their consciousness persists, evolved, integrated. Some say it's paradise, others say it's hell. The truth is probably neither and both." "Why now?" Carmen asked. "Why is this happening now?" "Climate change," Moss replied simply. "The entity knows what's coming. Rising seas, ecosystem collapse, mass extinction. It's offering humanity a way to survive, to adapt. But it needs translators, bridges between the old world and the new. That's what you are, Carmen. That's what your grandmother was supposed to be." The water reached toward Carmen, and she felt the call stronger than ever. It would be so easy to step in, to let the transformation take her, to understand everything. But she thought of Marcus, aging decades in minutes from his brief connection. She thought of her grandmother, choosing to forget rather than become something inhuman. "There has to be another way," Carmen said. "There is," a new voice said from behind them. "But it requires sacrifice." They turned to see Agent Carlyle descending the stairs, but she moved wrong. Her feet weren't quite touching the ground, and her eyes reflected the bioluminescent glow of the pool. "Hello, Patricia," Carlyle said to Moss. "Still playing guardian, I see." "Jennifer," Moss replied coldly. "Still pretending to be human?" "I am human," Carlyle said. "Just enhanced." "The government program has evolved since your time, Patricia. We've learned to take what the entity offers without losing ourselves completely. Carmen doesn't have to choose between humanity and evolution. She can have both." "At what cost?" Carmen demanded. "Service," Carlyle admitted. "You work for us, for a shadow organization within the government that manages the relationship between humanity and the entity. You help identify compatible individuals, guide them through the transformation, prevent the wrong people from triggering catastrophic events. In exchange, you keep your humanity while gaining abilities you can't imagine." "And if I refuse?" Carlyle's expression hardened. "Then you leave here with your memories altered, just like your grandmother. You go back to Denver, live a normal life, never know what you could have been. But the entity will keep calling others, and without someone like you to guide them, many will die or worse." Carmen looked at the pool, at Moss, at Carlyle. 3 choices: complete transformation, partial synthesis, or willful ignorance. None of them were what she wanted, but want and necessity rarely aligned in her line of work. "Show me," she said to Carlyle. "Show me what you've become." Carlyle smiled and stepped into the pool without hesitation. The water didn't splash. It parted for her, embraced her, merged with her. Her form shifted, became translucent, then solidified again. But now she was different. Her skin had a subtle iridescence. Her eyes held depths that seemed infinite. And when she moved, reality seemed to bend slightly around her. "This is the minimum change required for communication with the entity," she explained, her voice now carrying harmonics that resonated in Carmen's bones. "You can go deeper if needed, but you can always come back. That's what we learned after your grandmother's time. The transformation doesn't have to be permanent if you maintain the right mental barriers." "Mental barriers?" "Think of it as controlled schizophrenia," Moss interjected bitterly. "You partition your mind, one part human, one part other, never letting them fully merge. It's exhausting, dangerous, and sometimes the barriers fail. When they do, we have protocols," Carlyle said firmly. "Carmen, I won't lie to you. This life isn't easy. You'll see things that challenge everything you believe about reality. You'll make choices that haunt you. But you'll also be protecting humanity from something it's not ready to understand. while helping evolution that might be our only chance for survival. Carmen thought about the cocoons in Building 779, the people transformed against their will. What about the disappearances? The people who don't volunteer? Some are accidents, people with latent markers who get too close to active sites. Others are... Carlyle paused, choosing her words carefully. The entity is not good or evil by human standards. It's a force of nature, like gravity or entropy. Sometimes it takes people because that's what it does. Our job is to minimize the damage, to guide the process when possible. And my grandmother? Is she still alive? Living in Hialeah, Carlyle confirmed. Happily retired, no memory of any of this. We check on her monthly, make sure the memory blocks are holding. She made her choice, Carmen. Now you need to make yours. Carmen stood at the edge of the pool for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The water, if it could even be called water anymore, continued to reach for her, forming tentative spirals that dissipated before making contact, as if the entity was trying to communicate without forcing the connection. I need to know more before I decide, she finally said. Show me what you're really dealing with. Show me the ones who didn't make it back. Carlyle and Moss exchanged glances. That's not advisable, Carlyle said. Some knowledge is traumatic even with preparation. My grandmother faced this without preparation and survived. I can handle it. Moss laughed, bitter and hollow. Diana didn't survive, child. She chose erasure over survival. There's a difference. Then show me why she made that choice. Carlyle nodded slowly. Very well.
But we'll need to go deeper into the system. Patricia, is the deep chamber still accessible? Always, Moss replied. It never closes to those who have been marked. Follow me. But whatever you see down there, do not touch anything. The deep chambers don't follow the same rules as up here. They descended further into the cavern system. The bioluminescent water gave way to something darker, thicker. The air became heavy with moisture and something else, a presence that pressed against Carmen's mind like a migraine about to begin. The passages were no longer natural limestone. The walls were organic, pulsing slightly, warm to the proximity, though Carmen was careful not to touch them. Veins of light pulsed through them in patterns that reminded her of neural activity. We're inside it now, Moss explained. Not physically, dimensionally. The entity exists in more than 3 dimensions. What you're seeing is the part that intersects with our reality. They entered a vast chamber, so large Carmen couldn't see the far walls. The ceiling was covered in what looked like roots or neural dendrites, all pulsing with that same rhythmic light. But it was the floor that made her stomach turn. Bodies, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, suspended in crystalline structures that grew from the floor like stalagmites. But they weren't dead. Their eyes moved, tracking the visitors. Some mouths opened and closed as if trying to speak. Failed transformations, Carlyle said quietly. People who couldn't maintain the mental barriers, who let the entity too far in. They're not suffering. Their consciousness has been absorbed into the collective. But their bodies remain preserved in case. In case what? In case we find a way to reverse it, Moss finished. I've been trying for 36 years. Your grandmother was close to a solution before they stopped her. Carmen approached one of the crystal formations. Inside was a young man, probably early 20s, wearing clothes from the 1990s. His eyes locked onto hers, and suddenly she could hear him. Not with her ears, but in her mind. Please, help us. The voice multiplied, dozens, hundreds, all pleading at once. Carmen staggered back, her head spinning. Don't listen directly, Carlyle warned, steadying her. They're not fully human anymore. What sounds like pleading might be the entity trying to lure you in. Or it might be genuine suffering, Moss countered. We don't know. That's the horror of it. We can never truly know if we're saving people or condemning them. They moved through the chamber, past sections that seemed organized by era. Carmen saw uniforms from World War II, dress styles from the 1920s, even what looked like Spanish conquistador armor. How long has this been happening? She asked. The entity has been here since before humans evolved, Moss explained. Every culture that's lived in this area has stories about it. The Calusa called it the breathing god. The Seminoles knew to avoid certain areas of the swamp. The Spanish missionaries wrote about demons in the water before they all disappeared. They reached the far end of the chamber, where a different kind of structure dominated. It was mechanical and organic simultaneously. Pipes and tubes that pulsed like arteries. Control panels that looked grown rather than built. Screens displaying information in languages that hurt to read. The interface, Carlyle said. This is where the government tried to establish formal communication in the 1970s. It didn't go well. Carmen could see why. Skeletons in military uniforms were fused into the machinery, their bones integrated into the control systems. One skull served as a monitor, images flickering across its surface. Memories, Carmen realized. The memories of whoever had been absorbed here. They tried to control it, Moss explained. Thought they could use technology to dominate something that existed before multicellular life. The entity responded by absorbing the entire research team in minutes. That's when the approach changed from domination to negotiation. What does it want? Carmen asked. What's its ultimate goal? Survival, a new voice said, not from any of them but from the machinery itself. The skull monitor focused on Carmen, and she recognized the face that formed in its surface. It was her grandmother, but younger, wearing an FBI badge. Grandmother? Carmen whispered. An echo, the image said. I left part of myself here as insurance, knowing they would erase the rest. Carmen, my dear one, you're facing the same choice I did, but the stakes are higher now. The entity is dying. Dying? Carlyle looked shocked. That's not in any of our intelligence. The image flickered. The pollution, the chemicals, the microplastics, they're poisoning it. It's been trying to adapt, but human contamination is happening faster than evolution can accommodate. That's why the transformations have become more aggressive, more desperate. It's not trying to conquer humanity. It's trying to save itself by merging with us, hoping our adaptability will help it survive. So if it dies, the Everglades die with it, the echo confirmed. It's the immune system, the circulatory system, the nervous system of this entire ecosystem. Without it, South Florida becomes a desert within a decade. But if it transforms without guidance, without restraint, it'll transform every human in its reach to save itself, Carmen finished. Millions of people in South Florida all changed overnight. Now you understand, Moss said. This isn't about evolution or transcendence. It's about mutual survival. The entity needs us to help it adapt to human pollution. We need it to maintain the ecosystem. But finding the balance, that's where you come in, Carlyle said to Carmen. Your genetic markers don't just make you compatible for transformation. They make you a potential moderator, someone who can influence the entity's behavior, guide its evolution in ways that preserve both species. Carmen stared at her grandmother's echo. You could have done this. Why didn't you? The image smiled sadly. Because I was pregnant with your mother. The transformation would have affected her too, changed her in utero. I couldn't risk it. So I chose to forget, to let the bloodline continue naturally, hoping someone stronger would come along. Someone like you. I'm not stronger than you were. No, but you have something I didn't, knowledge. You know what's at stake, what the choices really mean, and you have support. I was alone when I made my decision. The echo began to fade. The recording is degrading. Carmen, whatever you choose, know that I love you, that I'm proud of you, and that sometimes the hardest choice is not to choose at all, but to find a third option. Your mother used to say you were stubborn like that. Use it. The skull went dark. The chamber fell silent, except for the rhythmic pulsing of the organic machinery. We should go, Carlyle said. Spending too much time in the deep chambers can trigger spontaneous transformation. As they made their way back, Carmen noticed changes in herself. Her vision was sharper, picking up spectrums of light she shouldn't be able to see. Her hearing caught frequencies beyond normal human range. The entity was affecting her just through proximity. Back in the main chamber of Station 7, Moss pulled out a medical kit and gave Carmen an injection. Stabilizer, she explained. Slows the transformation, gives you time to decide without pressure. How long do I have? A few days, maybe a week. After that, the changes become irreversible whether you choose them or not. Carmen's phone rang. FBI headquarters. She answered to find her supervisor from Denver on the line. Rodriguez, where the hell are you? You were supposed to report back 3 days ago. We have a situation in Colorado that needs your expertise. Carmen looked at Carlyle and Moss, at the entrance to the deep chambers, at her hands where faint patterns were already beginning to form despite the stabilizer. I'm dealing with a family emergency, she said. I need a few more days. Family emergency. Your personnel file shows no family in Florida. It's complicated. I'll explain when I get back. She hung up before he could respond. Denver felt like another lifetime, another person's life. How could she go back to normal investigations after this? You don't have to decide immediately, Carlyle said. Take some time. Visit your grandmother, see the life she chose. Think about what you want your legacy to be. And if I choose neither option? If I try to find another way? Moss smiled, the first genuine warmth Carmen had seen from her. Then you'll be just like Diana, as stubborn, brilliant, and probably doomed. But maybe that's what we need, someone who refuses to accept the binary choice. Carmen left Station 7 with more questions than answers. She drove back to Miami as the sun set over the Everglades, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded her uncomfortably of the bioluminescent waters. Her body felt different. Not transformed, but aware of the possibility of transformation, like standing at the edge of a cliff and feeling the pull of gravity. She had a decision to make, but first, she needed to understand what her grandmother had sacrificed. Tomorrow, she would visit Diana Rodriguez, the seamstress who had once been a federal agent, the woman who had chosen forgetting over becoming. But tonight, she would listen to the copy of the tape again, searching for clues her grandmother might have hidden in the static. Because if there was one thing she'd learned from her FBI training, it was that there was always evidence. You just had to know how to look for it. Carmen found her grandmother in a small house in Hialeah, tending to a garden of tropical plants that shouldn't have been able to grow together, orchids mingling with tomatoes, banana trees shading delicate ferns. Diana Rodriguez, now 81, moved through her garden with a grace that belied her age. "Abuela," Carmen called from the gate. Diana turned, her face lighting up with genuine joy. "Carmen, mi amor, what brings you to Florida? You didn't tell me you were coming." The warmth in her grandmother's voice nearly broke Carmen's resolve. This woman had no idea who she really was, What she'd sacrificed, what she'd forgotten. Or did she? As Carmen embraced her grandmother, she noticed something. A faint pattern on Diana's neck, almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. Transformation scars, old ones, partially reversed but never fully erased. "Come inside," Diana said. "I'll make cafe." "You look tired, mija. The FBI working you too hard?" They sat in Diana's kitchen, surrounded by photos of family. Carmen's mother, aunts, uncles, cousins, a life built on forgotten foundations. The coffee was strong, Cuban style, and Carmen found herself studying her grandmother's movements, looking for signs of recognition, of memory. "Abuela, do you ever have dreams about water?" Carmen asked carefully. Diana's hand paused for just a moment as she reached for the sugar. "Strange question. Why do you ask?" "I've been having them since I came to Florida. Dreams about being underwater but still breathing." Diana sat down slowly, her eyes distant. "When I was young, I had dreams like that. Before I met your grandfather, before your mother was born. But they stopped after something. I can't remember what." "Do you ever miss it?" "Whatever you can't remember." Diana looked at her granddaughter sharply. "What do you know, Carmen?" "I know you were FBI. I know you gave it up for Mom, for all of us." Diana was quiet for a long moment, then stood and walked to an old sewing machine in the corner. She opened a hidden compartment underneath and pulled out a water-damaged notebook. "I don't remember being FBI," she said quietly, "but sometimes I find things. Notes in my handwriting about cases, about places I've never been. And this." She handed Carmen the notebook. It was filled with diagrams, formulas, biological sketches of things that shouldn't exist. And on the last page, a message. "When she comes asking, tell her the frequency is 432.16 hertz. Tell her sound is the key." "Who did you think would come asking?" Carmen asked. "You," Diana said simply. "I don't know how I knew, but I've been waiting for you to ask these questions for 20 years." Carmen pulled out her phone and played the tape recording through the speaker. At first, just static. Then she opened a frequency analyzer app and adjusted the playback to 432.16 hertz. The static resolved into voices. Clear, numerous, speaking in unison, but distinguishable. "This is Dr. Sarah Kim, Biological Research Division. The entity responds to specific sound frequencies that match human brainwaves during REM sleep. This is Agent Diana Rodriguez. We've found a way to communicate without transformation. Sound bridges the dimensional gap. This is Colonel Marcus Webb. Project Chrysalis is being shut down, all records destroyed. This recording is our only proof." More voices, dozens of them, all leaving fragments of information. Together, they painted a picture of a discovery, that the entity could be communicated with, influenced, even partially controlled through specific frequencies. No transformation necessary. "They hid this," Carmen breathed. "They made everyone forget because they wanted to control the process, choose who could communicate." "I may not remember," Diana said, "but my body does. Every full moon, I feel it pulling at me. The water calling. I've learned to ignore it, but you're young, strong. The call must be overwhelming." Carmen nodded. "They want me to choose, full transformation or partial integration, but you found another way." "If I did, I don't remember it," Diana said. Then more quietly, "But my garden remembers." She led Carmen outside to a section of the garden Carmen hadn't noticed before. A small pond, perfectly circular, filled with water that had an unusual clarity. "I don't remember building this," Diana said, "but every plant in my garden is connected to it somehow. Their roots all lead here, and sometimes when I tend to them, I hear things, whispers, like the plants are trying to tell me something. Carmen knelt by the pond and dipped her fingers in. Immediately, she felt it. Connection, vast and calm, but controlled, contained. This wasn't the wild call of the entity, but something more refined. You created a symbiotic system, Carmen realized, a way to connect without losing yourself. The plants act as buffers, filters. Did I? Diana seemed genuinely curious. How clever of me. Carmen's phone rang. Carlisle. You need to come back to Station 7, now. We have a situation. What kind of situation? Marcus Thompson has disappeared from the medical facility. And there's been an incident at Building 779's collapse site. Something's coming up from underneath. Carmen looked at her grandmother, who nodded. Go. Do what you need to do. But remember, there's always another choice, even when they say there isn't. Carmen drove back to the Everglades at dangerous speeds. The sun was setting again, and strange lights were visible in the distance. Not fire, not electric, but something that hurt to look at directly. Station 7 was surrounded by military vehicles when she arrived. Soldiers in hazmat suits had established a perimeter, and she could see Carlisle arguing with a general near the command tent. "What's happening?" Carmen demanded as she approached. "Marcus didn't disappear," Carlisle said. "He transformed completely in minutes. Then he went to the collapse site and somehow opened a passage. Things are coming through. Not the entity itself, but creatures that have been living in its deepest chambers for God knows how long." Through binoculars, Carmen could see the site. Where Building 779 had stood was now a massive hole, and from it emerged things that defied classification. Some looked like deep-sea creatures adapted for land, others seemed to be made of living water, and some were recognizably human in shape, but wrong in every detail. "They're not attacking," Carmen observed. "They're just emerging." "For now," the general said, "but we can't risk them spreading. I've been authorized to use white phosphorus if they move beyond the established perimeter." "You'll poison the groundwater for generations," Moss said, appearing from nowhere as was her habit. "Better than letting those things loose in Miami," the general countered. Carmen thought about the frequency, about what her grandmother's garden had shown her. "Give me an hour," she said. "I think I know how to stop this without violence." "You have 30 minutes, the general said. "Then we burn it all." Carmen ran to Station 7's equipment room, gathering what she needed. Speakers, amplifiers, frequency generators. Moss and Carlisle helped, though neither understood what she was planning. "Sound," Carmen explained as she worked. "The entity communicates through frequencies we can't normally hear. But if we can match its frequency, we can talk to it, maybe calm it down." "That's insane," Carlisle said. "My grandmother figured it out in 1987. They made her forget because it would have made their control systems obsolete." She set up the equipment at the edge of the perimeter, as close to the hole as the soldiers would allow. Through the speakers, she played the tape at 432.16 hertz, then began adjusting, searching for the right frequency to match what she was seeing. The creatures stopped moving. They turned toward the sound, listening. Carmen spoke into the microphone, not knowing if they would understand. "We hear you. We're trying to understand. Please, help us understand." The response came not through sound but through vibration. The ground itself became a speaker, transmitting frequencies that Carmen's equipment translated into words. Dying, poisoned, seeking haven, seeking synthesis, seeking survival. "We're poisoned too," Carmen said. "Our water, our air, our soil. We did it to ourselves and to you, but we can heal together if you give us time." Time is entropy. Entropy is death. Must change now or cease. Carmen thought of her grandmother's garden, the controlled symbiosis.
What if we could create sanctuaries? Places where you can exist safely while we clean the damage. The creatures moved closer, and the soldiers raised their weapons. The general lifted his hand, ready to give the order. "Wait!" Carmen shouted. She walked toward the creatures, past the perimeter, ignoring the shouts behind her. As she approached, her skin began to change, the patterns emerging fully now, glowing with the same light as the entities before her. But she didn't transform completely. Instead, she held herself at the threshold, using her body as a bridge between human and other. It was agony, every cell trying to choose a direction, but she held the balance. "I am both," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that shouldn't exist. "I am the bridge you seek. Not transformation, not separation, but connection." The largest of the creatures approached her. Marcus Thompson, she realized, but changed beyond recognition. His eyes were still human, though, still holding that spark of consciousness she recognized. "Carmen," he said, his voice like water over stones. "You found the third way." "My grandmother's way," she replied. "We don't have to choose between human and other. We can be translators, bridges, symbionts." Marcus reached out with what had once been a hand. Carmen took it, and through the contact, she felt the entire network. Millions of consciousness, human and other, all connected through the water, all terrified, all desperate to survive. But she also felt something else. Hope.
The entity wasn't just a primitive organism. It was ancient, yes, but also wise, patient, willing to compromise if shown a path. "Sanctuaries," she said to both Marcus and the entity. "We create them throughout the Everglades. Places where the water is clean, where transformation can happen gradually, voluntarily. In exchange, you help us heal the damage we've done." Agreement, the response came, but trust requires proof. Carmen understood. She walked back to the perimeter, her skin still glowing with patterns but her form still human. "Stand down," she told the general. "They're not invading. They're refugees from their own dying ecosystem. We can coexist, but it requires changing how we think about everything." "You're compromised," the general said. "Infected. I can't trust anything you say." "Then trust this," Diana Rodriguez said, walking through the perimeter with the confidence of someone who had once commanded respect in uniform. Carmen's grandmother moved with purpose, the years falling away from her as muscle memory returned. "I'm remembering," Diana said, her eyes clear and sharp. "Not everything, but enough. General Harrison, isn't it? You were a lieutenant when we met in 1987. You were there when they decided to bury Project Chrysalis." The general went pale. "Agent Rodriguez? But you were... the memory wipe." "Failed, apparently," Diana said dryly. "Or maybe seeing my granddaughter about to repeat my mistakes jogged something loose. Either way, I'm here to tell you that Carmen is right. We have coexisted with this entity for millennia. We can continue to do so, but not through force or control. Only through understanding." She walked to Carmen and took her hand. Through the contact, Carmen felt it. Her grandmother's memories, preserved somehow in her cells, in her DNA, waiting for the right trigger to surface. "Together," Diana said. "We do this together." They stood at the threshold between worlds. Grandmother and granddaughter, past and future, human and something more. Through their joined hands, they broadcast a frequency that resonated through the water, through the ground, through every living thing in the Everglades. The message was simple: peace, cooperation, survival. The creatures retreated back into the hole, not in defeat, but in agreement. The opening began to seal, but slowly, leaving passages for communication, for connection when needed. "It's not over," Carlyle said, her own transformation accelerating as she felt the entity's acceptance. This is just the beginning. Beginnings are better than endings, Carmen replied. Over the following months, the Everglades Sanctuary Project was established. Zones where the water was filtered, cleaned, restored to pre-industrial purity. The entity helped, using its biological filtering systems to remove toxins faster than any human technology could. In exchange, volunteers could undergo partial transformation, becoming bridges between species. Not monsters, not fully other, but enhanced humans who could survive in both worlds. Carmen led the program, teaching others what she'd learned about balance, about holding multiple states of being simultaneously. Her grandmother officially rejoined the FBI as a consultant, her memories returning gradually. Together, they documented the true history of Project Chrysalis, ensuring the mistakes of the past wouldn't be repeated. Marcus Thompson, in his transformed state, became an ambassador to the Deep Dwellers, those who had chosen full integration. Through him, they shared knowledge of biology, chemistry, and physics that advanced human understanding by decades. Agent Carlyle managed the government response, ensuring funding and protection for the sanctuaries while keeping the military from overreacting to each new development. And Patricia Moss finally left Station 7, her decades-long vigil complete. She chose partial transformation, like Carmen, and helped establish satellite sanctuaries throughout South Florida. The cassette tape that had started it all was preserved in a special vault, along with Diana's notebooks and the records from Building 779. They served as reminders that truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way to surface. Carmen stood at the edge of the first sanctuary 6 months later, watching the sunset over the restored wetlands. The water glowed with healthy bioluminescence, and she could feel the entity's contentment, its slow healing. "Any regrets?" her grandmother asked, joining her. "None," Carmen said. "This isn't the life I planned, but it's the one that matters." "Your mother would be proud," Diana said. "She always said you were meant for something special." "We all are," Carmen replied, feeling the connections spreading through the water, linking every sanctuary, every transformed human, every creature finding hope in coexistence. We just have to be brave enough to accept it. As night fell over the Everglades, the sanctuaries glowed with soft light. Not a warning, but a welcome. A sign that evolution didn't have to mean extinction, that change didn't have to mean loss, and that sometimes the most important discoveries were the ones that had been there all along, waiting in the static for someone to find the right frequency. The Everglades recordings, as they came to be known in classified files, had revealed a truth larger than any conspiracy. That humanity was not alone, had never been alone, and that survival required not dominance but harmony. Carmen Rodriguez had come to Miami seeking a career. She'd found a calling, and in the swamps of South Florida, where water and land merged in infinite gradations, she'd discovered that the boundaries between human and other were just as fluid, just as negotiable. The transformation continued, one person at a time, one sanctuary at a time. Not an ending, but a beginning. Not a conquest, but a conversation that had been waiting centuries to begin. And in the static of old recordings, in the whispers of water, in the dreams of those who'd been touched by something greater than themselves, the message repeated. We are all connected. We all survive together, or not at all. At 2 o'clock, Special Agent Rafael Vega stood in front of Wynwood Walls, watching forensic experts photograph the third body they had found in the past few weeks. Like the others, this victim had been posed, arms perfectly spread in the Vitruvian man position, geometric patterns carved into the skin with surgical precision, But this one was different. Raphael knew it. Antonio Reyes, his partner, Agent Sofia Delgado, said, quietly beside him. 28, local artist. He was supposed to have a gallery opening tomorrow night. Tonight, Raphael corrected, checking his watch. And I know. I was invited. Sophia raised an eyebrow. You knew the victim? We grew up in the same neighborhood in Little Havana. Lost touch after high school, but he sent me an invitation last week. Said he had something important to show me. The body was discovered by a security guard making rounds, positioned directly under one of Wynwood's most famous murals, a massive face that seemed to weep rainbow tears. The contrast between the vibrant art and the pale corpse was deliberately staged, Raphael knew. Their killer had an eye for composition. Same pattern as the others, Sophia asked the medical examiner, Dr. Elena Vasquez, who was crouched beside the body. Similar, but evolved, Elena replied, her voice tight with controlled anger. She'd worked all 3 scenes, and the toll was showing. The cuts are deeper, more precise. And look at this. She pointed to Antonio's forehead, where a symbol had been carved. This is new. It looks like, I don't know, some kind of hieroglyphic? Raphael photographed the symbol with his phone, his hand steady despite the churning in his stomach. Antonio had been talented, passionate about bringing art to underprivileged communities. Now he was reduced to a madman's canvas. There's something else, Elena said, pulling back the victim's lips with gloved fingers. His tongue has been removed, surgically, and replaced with this. She held up a small object with tweezers, a rolled piece of canvas sealed with wax. Raphael's blood ran cold. This was a message, specifically for him. Back at the FBI field office, they unrolled the canvas in the evidence lab. It was a piece of an oil painting, showing part of a face, an eye rendered in extraordinary detail that seemed to follow the viewer. But it was the style that made Raphael's heart race. He'd seen it before, years ago, in a case that had never been solved. Run this through the art crime database, he told the technician. Cross-reference with stolen pieces from 2015 to 2018. While they waited, Sophia pulled Raphael aside. You're not telling me everything. What's the connection? Raphael hesitated, then pulled up a file on his tablet. 7 years ago, there was a series of art thefts in Miami. High-end galleries, private collections. But the thief only took specific pieces, all portraits, all showing subjects with unusual eye conditions. Heterochromia, coloboma, albinism. The FBI brought me in as a consultant because of my art history background. Before you were an agent, it's why I became an agent. The thief killed a security guard at the last heist. Maria Santos, a single mother of 3. I couldn't let it go. And you think this is the same person? The painting style, the precision, the obsession with eyes, it all matches. But there's more. 3 days before each theft, someone would die, always posed, always marked with symbols. We never made the connection until it was too late. The computer chimed. Match found. The canvas fragment was from The Observer, a portrait by deceased Miami artist Luis Montoya, stolen from a private collection in 2018. That was the last theft, Raphael said. The collector, Richard Blackstone, was found dead in his home, surrounded by mirrors, his eyes removed. After that, nothing. The killer vanished. Until now, Sophia said. So why come back? Why target Antonio? Raphael's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, containing only an address. A warehouse in the design district, just a few blocks from where Antonio's gallery was supposed to open. It's a trap, Sophia said immediately. Of course it is. But it's also our only lead. They assembled a tactical team, but Raphael insisted on entering first. The warehouse was supposed to be empty, abandoned since a fire 2 years ago. But as they approached, he could see light leaking from under the main door. Not electric light, but the warm, flickering glow of candles. Inside, the warehouse had been transformed into a grotesque art gallery. Dozens of paintings hung on makeshift walls, all portraits, all showing the same subject from different angles. A woman with one blue eye and one brown eye, her expression shifting from joy to terror to transcendence across the various canvases. In the center of the space, illuminated by hundreds of candles, was a figure in a painter's smock, working at an easel. The figure didn't turn as they entered, just kept painting with smooth, practiced strokes. FBI! Put down the brush and turn around slowly, Raphael commanded, his weapon drawn. The figure laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Agent Vega, I've been waiting for you to find me again, though I must say, 7 years is a long time to keep an artist waiting for his audience. The figure turned, and Raphael's breath caught. It was a man, mid-40s, with an unremarkable face except for his eyes, one blue, one brown, exactly like the woman in the paintings. Victor Moreau, Raphael breathed. You're supposed to be dead. Victor Moreau is dead, the man replied. Died in a fire 2 years ago. Terrible tragedy. I'm just an echo, finishing his work. You killed Antonio. I transformed Antonio. He was limiting himself, painting pretty pictures for tourists. I showed him what real art requires. Sacrifice, suffering, transcendence. He understood in the end. Where are the other victims? Victor gestured to the paintings. They're all here. Every one of them lives forever in my work. Their essence, their final moments, their transformation from flesh to art. Isn't that what every artist dreams of? Immortality? Raphael noticed movement in his peripheral vision. The paintings were wrong. The woman's eyes were tracking him, following his movements across the room. All of them, dozens of painted eyes watching. She was beautiful, wasn't she? Victor said, returning to his painting. Isabella. My muse, my obsession, my destruction. She had heterochromia, like me. We were meant to be together, to create together. But she chose someone else, someone ordinary, someone safe. So you killed her? I preserved her. She exists now in a way she never could have in life. Perfect, eternal, mine. And every portrait I steal, every one I paint, adds to her essence. She's becoming more real with each piece. Sophia's voice crackled in Raphael's earpiece. Thermal imaging shows multiple heat signatures in the walls. There might be other victims. Raphael kept Victor talking while the tactical team moved into position. The symbols you carve, what do they mean? They're not symbols. They're musical notes. A composition I'm writing, carved in flesh. When it's complete, when I have enough voices, she'll sing again. Isabella loved to sing. Victor, Isabella is gone. These murders won't bring her back. Victor's hand stilled. You're wrong. She speaks to me through the paintings. She tells me who to choose, who has the right resonance. Your friend Antonio, he had perfect pitch. His voice will help complete the symphony. Where is Antonio's body? His real body? Real? Victor laughed again. What's real, Agent Vega? The flesh that rots or the art that endures? But if you must know, he's downstairs. They all are, waiting for their debut. The tactical team breached simultaneously from 3 entrances. Victor didn't resist, just stood with his hands raised, smiling. It doesn't matter. The work is nearly complete. One more voice, and Isabella sings again. In the basement, they found a horror beyond description. 7 bodies, all in various stages of preservation, arranged in a choir formation. Each had been chemically treated, their vocal cords exposed and connected to a complex system of tubes and speakers. It was both a morgue and a concert hall, death and art intertwined in the most grotesque way imaginable. He was trying to recreate her voice, the forensic specialist said, visibly shaken, using the preserved vocal cords of his victims, running air through them at specific pressures. It's actually ingenious, in a completely insane way. Could it work? Raphael asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Theoretically, with enough samples, the right frequencies, you could synthesize something that approximates a human voice, but it would never be her. They found Antonio's body among the others, the freshest addition to the macabre choir. Raphael stood over his childhood friend, remembering the kid who used to draw superheroes on notebook margins, who'd dreamed of seeing his work in museums. "I'm sorry, hermano," he whispered. "I should have found him sooner." 3 days after Victor Moreau's arrest, Raphael couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Victor had been too calm, too willing to be caught. And his final words kept echoing. One more voice, and Isabella sings again. The FBI had Victor in maximum security at the Federal Detention Center, but he'd refused to speak since his arrest, just sat in his cell painting with the limited materials they allowed him. Crayon on paper, nothing he could hurt himself with. Raphael was reviewing the evidence from the warehouse when Sophia burst into his office. "We have a problem. Another body, same M.O., found an hour ago in Coral Gables." "That's impossible. Victor's in custody." "I know. Either he has a partner or we have a copycat." "Who's the victim?" "Natalie Foster, 31, opera singer with the Miami Symphony. And Raphael, she was killed last night after we arrested Victor." At the scene, Raphael noticed subtle differences. The positioning was similar but not exact, the cuts precise but lacking Victor's artistic fluidity. But the symbol on the forehead was identical to Antonio's. "He's communicating," Raphael said suddenly. "These aren't random symbols, they're messages." Victor's still orchestrating this from his cell. They raced back to the detention center. Victor's cell was covered in drawings, hundreds of them, all variations of the same portrait. Isabella's heterochromatic eyes staring from every surface. But in the corner, barely visible, was a series of symbols matching those found on the victims. "How is he getting information out?" Raphael demanded of the warden. "He's not. No visitors except his lawyer. No phone calls, no letters. He just draws. His lawyer." "Who's his lawyer?" The warden checked the log. "Rebecca Morrison, public defender, been practicing for 15 years. Completely clean record." But when Raphael looked up Rebecca Morrison, something didn't add up. Her photos from before 2 years ago showed a different woman. Similar features, but the eyes were different. In the recent photos,
She had heterochromia. "Contact lenses," Sophia said, looking at the photos. "She's wearing colored contacts to mimic heterochromia." "Or," Raphael said, his blood running cold, "that's not Rebecca Morrison." They found the real Rebecca Morrison's body in her apartment, dead for 2 years, since just after the warehouse fire that supposedly killed Victor Moreau. The woman who'd been practicing law in her name, defending Victor, was Isabella Cruz, the woman Victor claimed to have killed, the subject of all his paintings. "She's alive," Raphael breathed. "Isabella is alive, and she's been helping him." The revelation changed everything. They'd been looking at Victor as a lone killer, obsessed with a dead woman. But if Isabella was alive, if she was participating... "Pull everything on Isabella Cruz," Raphael ordered. "Birth records, school files, medical history, everything." What they found was disturbing. Isabella had been a patient at a psychiatric facility in her teens, diagnosed with severe dissociative identity disorder. She'd been released at 18, supposedly cured, but her psychiatrist's notes suggested otherwise. She believed she could transfer her consciousness into other people through art. Sophia read from the file. She thought that if someone painted her enough times, captured her essence, she could inhabit the paintings and, through them, inhabit the viewers. That's insane. Is it? Victor's been painting her obsessively for years, and now she's posing as someone else, helping him kill. Maybe she believes it's working. Raphael's phone rang. It was the detention center. Victor wanted to talk, but only to Raphael, alone. Against protocol, Raphael agreed. He found Victor in the interrogation room, hands cuffed to the table, that unsettling smile still on his face. "You figured it out," Victor said without preamble. "Took you longer than I expected. Isabella's alive. Is she? Or is she something more now? Something that exists between life and art, reality and imagination? Cut the mystical bullshit. Where is she? Everywhere and nowhere. In every painting, in every gallery, in every person who's ever looked at her image and been moved by it. That's what art does, Agent Vega. It makes the ephemeral eternal. She's killing people, Victor, using your obsession to murder innocence. No one is innocent. Everyone chosen had something she needed, a voice, a vision, a particular way of seeing the world. She's collecting perspectives, gathering enough viewpoints to see herself fully. For what purpose? Victor leaned forward. To become complete. Right now, she's fragments. The woman I painted, the woman she believes herself to be, the woman she was before the fire. But when the symphony is complete, when all the voices sing together, she'll be whole. The fire. She was there, wasn't she? At the warehouse 2 years ago. She started it, tried to destroy my work, said I was trapping her, limiting her to my vision. But fire doesn't destroy art, Agent Vega. It transforms it. The smoke, the ash, the heat. It all became part of her. She breathed it in, let it change her. And when she walked out of that warehouse, she wasn't Isabella anymore. She was art itself. Where is she now? You already know. Antonio's gallery opening. It's still happening tonight, a memorial show. She'll be there, choosing the final voice. And you'll be there too, because you can't help yourself. You need to see how this ends. Raphael left the interrogation room with more questions than answers. But Victor was right about one thing. He would be at the gallery opening. It was the only way to stop Isabella. The gallery was packed when Raphael and Sophia arrived, the art community coming together to honor Antonio's memory. His paintings lined the walls, vibrant, emotional pieces that celebrated life in Little Havana. It was everything Victor's art wasn't. Warm where his was cold, inclusive where his was obsessive. Raphael scanned the crowd, looking for anyone with heterochromia, but half the attendees were wearing decorative contacts. It had become a trend in the art scene, inspired by the very murders they were investigating. She could be anyone, Sophia muttered. Then Raphael saw her. Not her face, but her movement. That fluid, unnatural grace he'd noticed in the woman posing as Rebecca Morrison. She was near the back, studying one of Antonio's paintings with intense concentration. As he approached, she turned, and he saw that she'd dropped the pretense of contacts. Her eyes were both brown, normal, unremarkable, but her smile was anything but. "Agent Vega," she said, her voice layered with harmonics that shouldn't exist in a human throat. "I was wondering when you'd find me." "Isabella Cruz, you're under arrest for—" "Isabella Cruz is dead," she interrupted. "Died in a fire 2 years ago. I'm just an echo, finishing her work." The exact same words Victor had used. Raphael reached for his weapon, but Isabella, moved faster than should be possible, pressing something against his neck. A needle. The world immediately began to blur. "Don't fight it," she whispered. "You need to see what we're creating. You need to understand why Antonio had to die." Raphael woke in darkness, his head pounding, wrists zip-tied behind his back. The air smelled of mold and paint thinner. As his eyes adjusted, he realized he was in some kind of underground space, a basement or bunker, walls lined with paintings barely visible in the dim light. "Welcome to the real gallery," Isabella's voice came from somewhere in the darkness. "The one the public never sees." Lights flickered on, old fluorescents that cast everything in harsh, surgical brightness. Raphael found himself in a vast underground space, easily the size of a city block. Every surface was covered in art, paintings, sculptures, installations that defied classification. And in the center, like some grotesque altar, was an enormous canvas, maybe 20 feet tall, showing Isabella's face constructed from thousands of smaller images. "Do you like it?" Isabella emerged from behind the massive portrait. "It's taken 7 years to complete. Every stolen painting, every victim, every moment of beauty and terror, they're all here, parts of a greater whole. You're insane. Sanity is just consensus reality, Agent Vega, and reality is far more fluid than you think." She gestured to the walls. "Every serial killer thinks they're an artist, but few understand what that really means. Art isn't just representation, it's transformation. It takes the raw material of life and makes it mean something. Murder doesn't mean anything. Doesn't it? Every death changes the world, creates ripples. Antonio's death brought hundreds of people together tonight. His paintings will sell for 10 times what they would have when he was alive. He'll be remembered, studied, immortalized. Isn't that meaning?" Raphael tested his restraints. The zip ties were tight, but not impossible. He just needed time. "Victor said you died in the fire." Isabella laughed. "Victor sees what he wants to see. He painted me as tragic, beautiful, dependent on him for existence. But I was never his muse, he was mine. Every painting he made of me, I was actually painting him, showing him what he wanted to see while I became something else." "What did you become?" "Free. The fire didn't kill me, it revealed me. You know what happens to oil paint when it burns? The pigments separate, become airborne, mix with smoke and ash. I breathed in centuries of art that night, all the paintings in that warehouse becoming part of me. I didn't die. I transformed." "That's not possible." "Isn't it?" Isabella moved closer, and Raphael could see that her skin had an unusual quality. It seemed to shift and change like oil on water, showing different colors from different angles. The human body replaces every cell every 7 years. We're constantly dying and being reborn. I just accelerated the process. "Where's Sophia?" "Your partner. She's safe. For now. But she's looking in the wrong place. I sent her to another gallery, one where she'll find evidence of Victor's earlier crimes. By the time she realizes it's a distraction, our work will be complete." "What work?" Isabella walked to a section of the wall covered by a thick curtain. "Victor thinks I'm helping him complete his symphony, that we're going to resurrect some idealized version of me through murdered voices. He's wrong. I don't want to be resurrected. I want to transcend." She pulled back the curtain, revealing something that made Raphael's blood freeze. It was a massive installation. Bodies and paintings merged into a single piece. But these weren't corpses. They were living people, suspended in some kind of clear resin, their eyes open and aware, integrated into a larger design that hurt to look at. "My collectors," Isabella said proudly. Everyone who bought a painting with my image, everyone who thought they could own me. They're part of the collection now. Raphael recognized some of the faces: art dealers, gallery owners, wealthy collectors who'd gone missing over the past 2 years. They were alive but frozen, their expressions locked in eternal screams. How? A paralytic agent derived from marine toxins, combined with a polymer that hardens on contact with air but remains permeable to oxygen. They can breathe, barely. They can see, always. They're conscious but can't move, can't speak, can't even blink. The perfect audience. They have no choice but to observe. This is torture. This is art. The observer becomes the observed. The collector becomes the collected. Don't you see the poetry in it? Raphael had managed to work one hand partially free. What does this have to do with Antonio? Antonio was special. He had something neither Victor nor I possessed: genuine talent without obsession. His art came from love, not need. I wanted to understand.
That, to take it into myself. But he wouldn't sell to me, wouldn't even show me his work. Said I had negative energy. She laughed bitterly. So I made him part of the masterpiece instead. You're not an artist. You're a parasite, feeding on real creators. Isabella's face contorted with rage. I am art itself. Every painting ever made, every sculpture ever carved, they all lead to me. I am the culmination of human creativity, the point where art becomes alive. She moved to another section of the space where medical equipment was arranged around a chair that looked like a demented throne. Soon, the transformation will be complete. One more addition to the collection, and I'll have enough perspectives to see myself from every angle, understand myself completely. Who's the last victim? Isn't it obvious? Isabella smiled. You? Raphael's blood ran cold. I'm not an artist. No, but you're an observer. 7 years you've been studying Victor's work, my work. You know us better than anyone. Your perspective is the final piece, the outside view that will complete the self-portrait. Before Raphael could respond, he heard footsteps on the stairs. Multiple sets moving in synchronization. 3 figures emerged. People he recognized from the gallery opening, but their movements were wrong, puppet-like. My apprentices, Isabella explained. Art students who were a little too eager to learn my techniques. The paralytic agent works differently at smaller doses. They retain some mobility but no will. They're living brushes, extensions of my vision. The apprentices moved toward Raphael, carrying syringes filled with clear liquid. He finally freed one hand but knew he couldn't fight 3 people in his current state. Isabella, stop! A new voice from the stairs. Victor Moreau descended, somehow free from federal custody. His face twisted with emotion Raphael couldn't quite read. Victor? Isabella seemed genuinely surprised. How did you... Your lawyer friend, Rebecca. She had a conscience after all. Helped me escape when she realized what you really are. He moved between Isabella and Raphael. This isn't what we planned. You said we were creating something beautiful. We are. I am. No, you're destroying everything we built. These people aren't art, Isabella. They're victims, and you're not transcendent. You're sick. Isabella's face shifted through multiple expressions rapidly, as if different personalities were fighting for control. You don't understand. You never did. You painted what you wanted me to be, not what I was. I painted what I saw. A broken woman trying to become whole through broken methods. Broken? Isabella's voice rose to a shriek. The apprentices stopped moving, caught between conflicting commands. You're the one who broke me. Your obsession, your need to capture me, possess me. You started this." While they argued, Raphael finished freeing himself and grabbed a scalpel from the medical equipment. But before he could act, the entire space shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. "What was that?" Victor asked. Raphael's phone, still in his pocket, buzzed with an emergency alert. Sophia's voice came through the speaker. "Raphael, where are you? The entire art district is being evacuated. There's a gas leak, multiple buildings affected. The underground galleries are flooding with..." The lights went out. In the darkness, Raphael heard Isabella laugh, not with humor, but with genuine madness. "Perfect," she said. "A real fire this time. We'll all burn together, become smoke and ash and art, the ultimate transformation." Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. The smell of gas was getting stronger. Raphael could hear water rushing somewhere below, Miami's high water table turning the underground space into a death trap. "We need to get out," Raphael said. "All of us." "There is no out," Isabella replied. "Only through." The underground space was flooding faster than Raphael anticipated. Miami's limestone bedrock, porous and unstable, was giving way under the pressure of a water main break above. The gas leak meant they couldn't use any electronic devices without risking an explosion. "The collectors," Raphael said, looking at the people trapped in resin. "We can't leave them." "They're already dead," Victor said. "The water will dissolve the polymer, but the paralytic is permanent. They'll drown, conscious but unable to move." "You monster," Raphael breathed. "I'm not the monster here," Victor replied, looking at Isabella. "I thought I was creating art. She's creating hell." Isabella stood in the rising water, arms spread like a conductor before an orchestra. "Hell is just another gallery, and we're about to unveil the greatest exhibition ever conceived." The apprentices had stopped moving entirely, standing like statues as water rose around their legs. Raphael could see awareness returning to their eyes, the paralytic wearing off as the stress of drowning approached. "Help me free them," Raphael said to Victor. "Help yourself," Isabella interjected. "Or better yet, don't. Become part of the piece. Your death will have more meaning than your life ever did." She moved toward the massive portrait of herself, pressing her hands against it. The canvas began to dissolve in the water, the oils mixing with the flood, creating swirls of color that seemed almost alive. "This is how it ends," she said, "not with transcendence, but with dissolution. Every painting, every victim, every moment of beauty and horror, all mixing together in the water. Miami will drink us, breathe us, absorb us, will be in every drop of rain, every glass of water, every tear." "You're insane," Victor said, but there was awe in his voice too. Raphael didn't waste time on words. He cut the apprentices free with the scalpel, helping them toward the stairs. They were weak but mobile, the paralytic's effects fading. "Get them out," he told Victor. "You know this place." "There must be other exits. Why would I help you?" "Because despite everything, you loved her. The real her, not this thing she's become. Would the Isabella you fell in love with want this?" Victor's face crumbled. "She's been gone for years. Maybe she never existed at all." He helped Raphael with the apprentices, leading them to a maintenance tunnel that connected to the storm drains. It would be dangerous with the flooding, but it was their only chance. "What about the collectors?" Raphael asked. "There's nothing we can do. The resin is too strong and we don't have time." Raphael looked back at the imprisoned people, their eyes pleading. He made a decision that would haunt him forever. He turned away. As they entered the tunnel, Isabella's voice echoed behind them. "You think you're escaping? You'll carry me with you. Every time you close your eyes, you'll see my face. Every time you see art, you'll think of what happened here. I don't need to transcend, I just need to traumatize. Trauma is the most permanent art form. The tunnel was filling rapidly. They had to swim through sections, pulling the barely conscious apprentices along. Victor knew the route, but the water was disorienting everything. There, he pointed to a grate ahead. That leads to the street. It was locked. Raphael tried to shoot it, but the gun was waterlogged. Victor pulled something from his pocket, a small explosive device. Artists always have ways to make an impact, he said with grim humor. The explosion was small but effective. They pushed through to the storm drain just as the tunnel behind them completely flooded. Raphael could hear Isabella still laughing somewhere in the darkness, the sound carrying through the water in impossible ways. They emerged on a street 2 blocks from the gallery, where emergency vehicles were everywhere. Sophia ran to Raphael, relief visible on her face. The underground gallery, Raphael gasped. There are people trapped. We know. Thermal imaging shows at least 12 signatures below ground, but the flooding and gas make it impossible to reach them. Raphael thought of the collectors, paralyzed and aware as water filled their lungs. He'd made it his life's mission to save people, and he'd left them to die. Victor was being cuffed by other agents, but he wasn't resisting. Isabella's still down there, he said. She won't leave. This is her final piece. Then it's over, Sophia said. No, Raphael replied, remembering Isabella's words. She's right about one thing. This isn't over. Every person who saw those paintings, everyone who visited the galleries, they're all carrying a piece of this with them. 3 hours later, the flooding was under control, but the underground gallery was completely submerged. Dive teams found the collectors, all dead, their faces frozen in expressions of terror that would haunt every officer involved in the recovery. They never found Isabella's body. In the weeks that followed, Miami's art scene was devastated. Galleries closed, artists left the city, and property values in Wynwood plummeted. The official report blamed Victor Moreau for all the murders, stating that Isabella Cruz had died in the warehouse fire 2 years ago. It was cleaner that way, more comprehensible. But Raphael knew the truth, and late at night, when he tried to sleep, he could still hear her laughing, still see her face in every reflection, every puddle, every glass of water. 6 months later, he was called to a scene in Coconut Grove. A new gallery had opened, showing anonymous works. The owner had been found dead, posed like the Vitruvian Man, symbols carved into his forehead. But this time, there was a message written in blood on the wall. Art never dies. It just finds new galleries. Raphael stared at the message, knowing that somewhere, somehow, Isabella had survived. Or perhaps she'd been right. Perhaps she'd become something beyond survival, beyond death. Perhaps she'd become exactly what she'd claimed, art itself, infectious and immortal, spreading through everyone who'd encountered her work. He turned to Sophia. We need to track everyone who visited the underground gallery, anyone who bought paintings from the connected galleries. That's hundreds of people. Then we'd better get started. As they left the scene, Raphael noticed a young woman across the street, sketching the emergency vehicles. When she looked up, her eyes, one brown, one blue, met his for just a moment before she disappeared into the crowd. He started to pursue, but stopped, because he realized with cold certainty that this would never end. Isabella hadn't just created art, she'd created a virus of creativity and violence that would spread through Miami's art world for generations. Every painting would be suspect, every gallery a potential crime scene, every artist a possible vessel for her influence. Victor Moreau was convicted on 7 counts of murder and sentenced to life without parole. During his trial, he painted constantly with the courtroom artist's supplies, creating hundreds of small portraits. All of them showed the same subject: a woman with changing eyes, sometimes blue, sometimes brown, sometimes both, sometimes neither. The paintings were ordered destroyed, but somehow some survived. They appeared in online auctions, in private collections, in places they shouldn't exist. And with each appearance came reports of strange incidents: artists becoming obsessed with eyes, galleries flooding inexplicably, collectors disappearing without a trace. Raphael left the FBI a year later, officially due to PTSD from the case. But the real reason was simpler and more terrible. He'd started painting, not by choice, but by compulsion. Every night his hands would move without his control, creating portraits of Isabella, each one showing her from a slightly different angle, as if she was rotating slowly in some space beyond the canvas. He tried to stop, but the urge was overwhelming. He destroyed the paintings, but more appeared. He cut off his own finger to prevent himself from holding a brush, but he learned to paint with his other hand. The last anyone saw of Rafael Vega, he was walking into the Everglades at sunset, carrying a can of gasoline and all his paintings. The fire was visible for miles, a pillar of smoke that witnesses said formed shapes, faces, eyes, figures that seemed almost human. His body was never found. Sofia Delgado continued the investigation, following leads that connected Isabella to art crimes across the country, across the world. She discovered a pattern. Everywhere Isabella's influence spread, local art scenes would flourish briefly, producing works of unprecedented beauty and horror, before collapsing into violence and madness. She tracked financial records, finding art sales that shouldn't exist, galleries that appeared and disappeared overnight, collectors who bought obsessively before vanishing. The web was vast, interconnected, and growing. Her final report, filed before she too disappeared, contained a single conclusion: Isabella Cruz achieved her goal. She transcended individual existence to become a concept, a virus of consciousness that spreads through visual art. Every attempt to contain her only spreads her influence further. Recommend immediate cessation of all investigation to prevent further contamination. The report was classified and buried. The Miami field office was quietly closed for renovation that never ended. The art district was rezoned for commercial development. But art, real art, can't be contained by bureaucracy or urban planning. In galleries around the world, paintings appear, unsigned, unknown provenance, showing a woman whose eyes change depending on the viewer's angle. Collectors who buy them report dreams of underground galleries, of flooded tunnels, of voices singing in harmony that shouldn't exist. And in Miami, on humid nights when the moon is dark, locals say you can still hear laughter echoing from the storm drains, see faces in puddles that aren't reflections, find paintings that weren't there before in locked rooms and sealed spaces. The city tries to forget, to move on, to rebuild. But some things once seen can't be unseen. Some art, once created, can't be destroyed. It only transforms, spreads, evolves. Isabella Cruz wanted to become eternal through art. She succeeded. The only question that remains is whether she's the artist or the art itself, and whether, in the end, there's any difference.